Please stand with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, good morning, everyone. I'll now call to order the Clay County School Board Workshop meeting for October 24th, 2023. I want to welcome the citizens that have joined us this morning and take this opportunity to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to attend today's School Board Workshop. This workshop is our opportunity as your elected representatives to collaborate openly among ourselves and make decisions that will decide the future direction of our public schools and the education of our children here in Clay County. There will be an opportunity for the public to ask questions at the end of the workshop presentation. Questions will be allowed, public comment will not be allowed. If you wish to ask a question, please fill out a comment card and hand that card to one of our deputies. Your participation is welcomed and appreciated. The first item on our agenda, we're going to shuffle a little bit and allow the Sheriff's Department to make their presentation first.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Am I good here?
You're good. Wherever
Okay.
you want to go, sir.
Very good. Thank you. So good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to come before you here today. So several months ago, the school board began a conversation about potentially moving the school district police officers back over to CCSO. And I was contacted by the school district and asked to start a conversation about what that may look like. So I wanted to go over a couple of things organizationally, a timeline, and then I'm going to bring up our CFO, Vicki Adams, to discuss some numbers. So for the school board members, I've provided you a small book that has the timeline and some of the documents. Understand that I have a whole book of documents that were shared back and forth. To me, this was just the highlight of some of the important things that were shared. So Mr. Obrowski and I, at your direction, met on July 17th. And on that date, we actually met in very good conversation. And he provided us some questions that the school district had, specifically in regards to capabilities, operations, what that potentially could look like. So we started working on that, and then on July 20th, we provided the school district some questions from us. Again, itemized list of how many officers do you employ, what support personnel do you employ, what equipment comes with those folks, so that we could start pulling our information together. If you look, and on October 1st, we provided, the school district, I apologize, I'm fighting a really bad head cold. The school district provided us information, and then we also went back and forth several times with questions and then follow up. Now, we did, to the best of our ability, answer all the questions that were provided to us. One thing that we had to wait on, however, was our budget approval. Our budget approval did not occur until the end of September. And so when it came to actual numbers, we had to wait for the BCC to approve our budget, which included a compensation plan, so that we could provide best estimate numbers of how much a transition would cost and what those ongoing costs would look like. So if you turn to tab 8 in your book, this is the worksheet that was provided to each of you that shows 3 scenarios. One being if CCSO took over all schools and dissolved the MOUs between Orange Park and Green Cove. The middle column is CCSO took over responsibility for the schools and we left the MOUs in place. And then the last column was the school district retaining operations of the school police. And then after that was the questions that or the information that we provided to you on our itemized list of costs We itemize everything from salaries to benefits to FRS contributions, auto insurance, liability insurance, down to the mourning bands that deputies wear on their badge during ceremonies. So we were able to itemize every single thing, and that information was also provided to you. And then a copy of an organizational chart, which was also provided, is an idea of what organizationally this setup would look like. If you look at the raw numbers, it is a +1 that we would have, +1 personnel with a little bit of reorganization. In my opinion, if the Clay County Sheriff's Office were to take over this responsibility, we would create the position of director. A director is somebody who reports directly to the undersheriff and me. It is a direct line of communication, and that would be the highest ranking person under our arm if we were to do that. Otherwise, it's just a shuffle of some positions to organizationally match what we currently do with our chain of command and span of control. Any specific questions for me? Am I allowed to ask questions, or are you allowed to ask questions? Okay.
Sure. Any questions from the board or from the superintendent at this time? Nope, we're good.
All right, I'm going to bring up CFO Vicki Adams at this point, and she's going to go over the numbers. And again, this is just a repeat of what we discussed with you earlier.
If it's all right, I would like to ask some questions, but at the end.
At the end, is that okay with you, Sheriff?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. I'm going to continue on with the information behind tab 8 that we're already at that place. As the sheriff mentioned, we have put together to our best ability a proposal for you, and that first page is a summary of that. The pages behind that provide the detailed line item of what compose our numbers. And we appreciate all the information that was shared with us in order for us to try to do our best in putting together our budget. So I'll start with the first page of the summary, and as the sheriff mentioned, the first column to the left is the basically CCSO had all schools, and under personnel you'll see those items listed out as far as the cost of personnel. Of note is within our budget we have included the assumption that we would roll the current school board police officers into our new compensation plan, in which they would all be receiving raises in comparison to the current rates that we understand they're making today. We also would honor their years of service with the PD, as well as any accrued time off that they have on the books here, we would load onto our books. So we're trying to make sure that that transition is a very positive thing for the officers. Again, our proposal includes bell-to-bell. We're trying to do a very similar approach to what you're accustomed to today. Would be bell-to-bell, but it is 365 days a year. We would dedicate this arm of the agency to school safety, and we've mentioned to the superintendent that this group of officers would be dedicated to the schools and for school safety. So even in the summer, if there's summer school or a need for officers to be at the school, they certainly would do that, but they would also be in the community, again, interacting with the students throughout the year. If you move to the center column, that's a comparison of the personnel costs. Again, the similar assumptions. The only difference is that the MOU with Orange Park and Green Coast Springs would be maintained for the 5 officers they currently provide. There is a slight difference though, as the sheriff mentioned. We would make sure that dispatch comes directly into CCSO instead of it being relayed through Green Code into CCSO. Again, we want to make sure time is of the essence, so we want to be able to respond as quickly as possible. The far right column is the information that we were provided for the current school year, 23-24, and the estimate that we were able to try to put together. Again, ours, the way we budget is a little bit different. We do a very line item detail, and again, we try to provide that for you as well. Our goal was to make sure, again, we're providing an equitable level of equipment and service that you're already accustomed to, and the information that was provided to us was helpful to help us understand the equipment and things that the existing PDs currently have. And then we compared that to what we provide our officers and would make sure that they were fully equipped. Then the middle portion of that summary sheet goes into operating expenses. Again, at CCSO, because law enforcement is what we do, we have a very detailed approach in how we budget down to, as the sheriff mentioned, down to their uniforms, every single piece of equipment they have, and everything else. So you'll see in the accompanying documents a very detailed list that we have provided related to transition costs. We have also committed to, if there's any kind of equipment that the current officers have that would be able to come over and be reused, we certainly would do that. For example, if their gun belt could be reused, we certainly would do that. And we would not bill the school board for additional items that we didn't need to purchase for them. So again, we try to include all the operating expenses down to whether it's liability insurance, auto insurance. We also offer the enhanced legal coverage for all of our officers, which we included that as well. Because of our size of our agency, many of our IT licenses are site licenses, so we would be able to roll them in without having to buy additional licenses. So again, no additional cost to the school board for that. And so you can see the details there that we've provided for you to review as well. Again, we are proposing for the next school year, 24-25. So this comparison is, again, the best that we could do. The numbers coming from that first right column are for the current school year. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of the difference there. And then capital costs, we're not forecasting any for the actual budget for next year. However, we would be including some items in the transition cost. We have certain pieces of equipment, just like the PD, that expire on a frequency. For example, their vests, they expire every 5 years. They also we have AEDs in our vehicles, so that those also expire every 5 years. So we're not anticipating that in the 24-25 budget, but as I get into the transition costs, you'll see some of those items in there. And then they would run into our normal frequency of transitioning those when those things come up for expiration in the 5-year period. So that's the annual budget that we put together. Again, 2 different proposals. And we're anticipating that this would be funded as from the 1 mil that the taxpayers have approved for school safety. And again, is for 365 days for the year. I also wanted to mention at the end of the year by law, we have to zero out our books. And so any unused funding, again, a budget is forecast. At the end of the year, we know the actual expenses. Any unused funding would be returned because we have to zero those things out. So again, we're presenting a cost, a break-even cost perspective. And again, by law, we have to zero our books out. So if every dollar is accounted for, if we, simple example, if we received $1,000, we only spent $900, we would return the $100. And then the new fiscal year budget would start afresh. As mentioned, transition costs, again, in your packet is a very detailed document. It's about 3 pages long to give you a perspective of how we would budget for those transition costs. Again, if we had all the schools versus if the MOUs were in place, you'll see that line itemed out. And then I also mentioned the capital cost, which is another detailed document, which gives you an idea of future capital costs. We understand that the existing PD vests are expiring in 24-25, so we've included those in the transition cost to make sure that they are safe and they have vests that are not expired. Your vehicles, we received the list of all the vehicles. The assumption is with this proposal that those vehicles and all the capital and all the equipment would be transitioned to CCSO. Again, the taxpayers have already paid for these, and we just want to continue to use those vehicles. They appear to be on the average low mileage, and so we would roll those into our fleet and make sure they're properly maintained. Our current fleet rotation is based upon a few factors. Usually we look at mileage. If it's over 100,000, then we begin to look at that vehicle and look at the maintenance records and see is it time to be rolling that out of the fleet and purchasing a new vehicle. Sometimes you get a lemon and they're in the fleet all the time and there's just problems with it. At some point you don't want to keep pouring money into a vehicle that's just got problems. So we look at age, mileage, and maintenance records. So as we would prepare a budget in future years, we would be including those list of vehicles that would be coming up for rotation. We are estimating at this point, based upon the information we received, that we would start replacing those in 26, 27, probably 5 to 6 vehicles a year. And again, I mentioned the AEDs. Those are initial purchases are included in the transition costs, but in 5 years they would be expiring, and so in the year 29, 30 we would start replacing those. So that is really the transition costs and future capital costs. Let's see, I just want to make sure I've covered everything that I thought was pertinent for this meeting. I believe I have, so we'll be happy to answer any questions anyone might have. Thank you.
Ms. Clark's there for you.
Okay.
I think I'm having problems with the numbers as well. When I look at the page that you've got, and I look at the school district police, 3.6 for personnel, that can't possibly be salary and benefits. And I feel like that may be closer to 22, 23 numbers. But even still, I'm not finding anything, and Dr. Legatka, you can probably help me. But I'm looking, I know this one expenditure we did with the 1 mil, we've got salaries for 22, 23 at 3.1 mil, and employee benefits at 1.2, so that's 4.4 right there. You know, when I look at little things like fuel, it's 50,000 compared to 85,000. But I think to get to the gist of what you were saying, your numbers are 24, 25. So we don't have the raises for the district in here. So I think, running through all the numbers that I did, I think we're going to be a whole lot closer. And I'm wondering if we can get some estimated of what 24, 25 will be and try to be much clearer with everything, because I don't see insurance on here either. So, you know, all that, I think if we're going to compare apples to apples, because right now we've got apples to oranges, and that'll take a little bit of time. But overall, you know, we've got the historical millage, and we've got an estimate of hopefully collecting 21 mil total, which even at 6.1, that's like 31% of the total millage would be police, and the rest would be for hardening the schools. But I did have some, not trying to get into the weeds of this, I just had some basic overall questions. I agree regarding the cars and such, you know, the citizens shouldn't have to pay twice. We ought to be able to utilize any vehicles if we do make this change and just shift it over.
Ms. Clark, if I can jump in, because I think it's important that the you know, whatever decision you guys or ladies come to, we will make it work. Whether you choose to keep the school district police as is or you transition. I mean, that's what we do. We're professionals. We'll make it work. But every year, if it were to transition, every year you would be provided a line item budget. And this is not about making money for us. We would return any leftover monies, and it would be revenue neutral for us. So I just want to make that very clear.
Can I just, and when you mean line item budget, you mean a detailed one such as the one that was provided?
Yes, ma'am. We do that for everything, and it's updated regularly. So if we forecast, you know, $50,000 for fuel, in the middle of the year, we can tell you what percentage of that money we've used for fuel. And so we keep percentages, and we meet monthly to discuss where we're at in our budget. And I would foresee that, you know, we meet with all the directors now and talk about where they are with their budgets. And I would foresee if a transition were to occur, we would come in regularly and speak to you and say, okay, this is where we're at in the budget.
And I can request that at any time, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
The line item.
I'll try to be quick. I want to point out that this was not the sheriff's idea. This was the school board's idea to request this review. I mean, we're supposed to provide oversight. We work for the citizens, and we have that responsibility. So it's just, you know, let's not blame the sheriff. She's not Darrell Daniels. And thank God our superintendent is not Addison Davis. Thank you. But I've got a couple of questions that I'd like to just be specific. A big concern of our current SROs is that they did not want to change because they felt that they'd be put back on the streets. Can you address that?
Yes, ma'am. You know, so I'm going into my 32nd year in law enforcement, and you know, the guys and gals that I've worked with will tell you we hate change. Like, we want change, but we hate change. And I would understand that would be a natural concern. So operationally, if you look at it, it would make no sense for us to onboard a bunch of people that have a relationship, that have a capability, and then move them around. That would operationally make no sense. If this were to happen, it would be my intent to hire as many people as possible and make the transition as smooth as possible and keep them in their same positions, because operationally that makes most sense.
I hope everybody was listening. Dr. Kemp brought out during his presentation an issue with liability concerning if we had an SRO, CCSO, SRO, at a school, and a call came out for, say, an accident in front of the street, a house across the street, liability issue. I know we've got that same concern in the 1,000-foot perimeter, you know, that we've allowed to go off-site with. Can you explain how that would or wouldn't be an issue?
Sure. So, you know, anytime a deputy or an officer is assigned to a specific location, and I'll just give you the example. We have, by law, people assigned to the jail, and their primary responsibility is to the jail. If you're made aware of an issue nearby, there is an obligation to go check it out and just make sure that there's no immediate life safety issues. But as you're doing that, what happens is the deputy will key in on the radio and say, I'm so-and-so and I'm at this location. I'm being told of an accident a block away. And then as soon as that happens, units start going en route there. So, you know, I would say that is a normal part of doing business, and deputies and officers are very good about quickly analyzing what they've been told, and then making, you know, the split-second decisions to go check it out, and then keying in on the radio with the dispatch of what they have and asking for additional units as needed.
I've heard a lot about training, consistent training. What would you provide with the sheriff's office? How would you handle it? How often? I mean, I know when I was down at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, one of the big things that we talked about was the difference between the two police departments, how one acted and one really didn't. And obviously, to me, this is not a budget item. This is a safety item for our children.
Sure.
And I want to make sure that whatever we do, compared to what we've got now, I want to make sure that we're equal or better.
Sure. So, you know, there is CJSTC, which is our governing body, required training. We are accredited, so there's additional accredited training. And then I have a standalone training unit that does what we call block training. And block training will consist of the required training, and then we also look across the horizon to see what issues are coming forth, and whether it's active shooter or whether it's de-escalation, all of those things that are happening. Our training unit then creates curriculums or pulls curriculums from the state to train consistently. We have a very robust training unit, and that is their only job to train. For those, if we're talking specifically about active shooter, there's probably no subject that's closer to my heart than that issue. And, that is, in fact, this past Friday, we did a 200-person large-scale exercise that involved an active shooter. So, what I would say is that we not only meet the required training, but we are constantly going above and beyond with additional training. And I think that is because I have the capability of the standalone training unit that I can say, okay, we're seeing this issue, let's get a curriculum now and get it pushed out.
Can I ask a question? One of my concerns was, with our current police force, is we did not have specialty units. So for instance, sex crimes for juveniles. What does the sheriff have, in particular, I guess, training that would help with cases, sensitive cases with juveniles?
So, I think with any organization that is bigger, that has deeper capability, deeper resources, we have, listen, I think the officers at the school board do a good job. What the sheriff's office has is just, we're bigger and we have more depth in those specialized areas. So, whether it's victims advocates, investigators who do nothing but sex crimes investigations, crime scene technicians who are used to processing scenes like that, that's what the larger agency would bring to the table.
Okay.
I was gonna say that was pretty much my next question. What areas would you bring to the table that maybe we don't have right now? Because, victims advocate, whatever.
Yes, ma'am. We have victims advocates, detectives that, a whole team of detectives, crime scene technicians, all of the stuff that you would expect just with a larger agency.
So your full resources would also be extended to this branch of the sheriff's department?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious how the policy is written for the sheriff's office. Going back to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, I think one of the reasons the SRO got off was how that policy was written. Apparently it was written that the SRO may go towards a shooter, and since then it's been changed to shall. Mm-hmm. So it makes us responsible to do so. Do you remember how the policy is written for?
We shall go, and we train solo officer response. That is something that we preach from the top down, and that we practice and that we train for.
Okay. And this is more of a comment, but I understand what happened 4 years ago, but as far as the calls that come from the district, they go to Green Cove, and then the calls go to the sheriff's office. And I'm wondering, when we can make that change to where it's a direct to the sheriff's office. That's just an overall comment. I just, time is of the essence with any situation, and I just think it's imperative that we cut out that additional minute and a half or whatever it might take. And I'm not going to say a whole lot more because everybody's got a lot to do, but I would like to ask for a letter of intent from the sheriff's office be provided to us, so that we may place this on the agenda and take a vote November 2nd preferably. I know we've got a lot to go over and debate, but I would hope that we would keep, my feeling is I would hope we would keep Orange Park and Green Cove in place, because just like our SRO officers, I don't want this to be a big change to the children. They've built up a rapport with their current officer, and I think the less changes we have, the better. So if we do decide to do this, that's it.
Anybody else have questions, comments?
I think, I'm looking over my notes, I had to put them on my phone today, so I apologize. I'm looking over it, and I feel like Ms. Clark has touched on just about everything. I know in previous meetings and school board meetings, I have expressed my concerns and my questions. And I'll tell you from the beginning, knowing that I was running for this seat, I have been doing my homework since then. So, you know, upholding transparency, following the law, and parental rights is what I think we need to continue to strive for, and the safety and security of our kids are far more important than a dollar amount. I mean, I can't even express that enough. They're irreplaceable. So I think, I know, I agree with Ms. Clark. I'm not really sure, Mr. Blocker, what we have to do to move forward with putting this on the agenda, but whatever we can do, I think that we need to move in that direction. 1 of 5, I feel strongly about that. I also want to say that whatever decision that the board makes moving forward, that, you know, we as a board have a responsibility to the taxpayers of Clay County. And it infuriates me when I can't get a line item budget like this. This is so detailed, and I thank you guys for this. I mean, I can literally go on here and look at what each unit costs and a total at the end to know that every taxpayer dollar went here. This is, when we talk about transparency, this is full transparency. This is exactly what I, as a tax-paying citizen of Clay County, want to see. I want to see, okay, if I'm going to vote for a meal for safety and security of my children, I want to know that every dollar is accounted for in this manner, and that it's spent appropriately. I'm not saying that we're not spending it appropriately, not saying that funds are going here, there, or everywhere. I'm just saying that this is the transparency that Clay County citizens want.
And I just want to personally thank you and your organization, the professionalism and the amount of time that you spent to prepare something. I was kind of joking with my husband. I ran around during the campaign spewing my ideas, and one of them was about our police force. Not that we're not doing a good job, it had nothing to do with that, but it was for the tax dollars. Could we do better, and could we be safer? And I appreciate the amount of work that must have went into something like this. So thank you very much.
Ms. Bola, I failed to mention at the start of the meeting, we have Ms. Bola joining us on the phone. Ms. Bola, did you have any questions or comments to add?
Oh, I have a few.
Okay.
Many of them have already been asked and answered. Thank you for asking Ms. Clark about the perimeter and pulling an officer away from the school. And from what I heard, this would be a separate, not separate, but a program that would be specific within the sheriff's office that would be dedicated to school safety with the director of school police. Sheriff, up to this point, you've worked very closely with our police department in training, have you not?
On some things, yes, ma'am, but they have their own training program. I could not speak to how many hours. I know we did a active shooter debrief, Chief Wagner, but I'm not sure what else we've done with them. But I believe you have your own standalone training program?
We do. So we have done the active shooter training with you. We've done, I know that we've gone through some of the FBI training and things of that nature as well. What is your position on using Guardian?
I view Guardians as a force multiplier. I think anytime you can have an additional set of eyes and ears that is focused on safety, I think that's a good thing.
And the Guardians would be, you train the Guardians, that's legislatively directed, and then we employ them. So would we continue employing the Guardians, and or are you considering them part of the force as well?
I believe statutorily, and Superintendent Brodsky, they would report to the school district.
Statutorily, they work
Right.
for the school district.
Correct. Dr. Ogutsko, I'm assuming you're sitting there. if you've had a chance to review the financials, what is the I don't have any paperwork in front of me, obviously, and my meeting with the sheriff isn't until next week. What specifically do you see as a comparison? I know Ms. Clark mentioned the numbers are different. We're going to be on completely different budget years. The sheriff starts October 1st, if I'm not mistaken. Ours starts July 1st. What do you foresee, Dr. Levesque, as the additional expense of this?
Well, we were comparing our next year numbers, which we're pretty confident in because our budget passed our pay plan, compared to 23-24 numbers that we were given, and it was $768,000. With the majority of that cost being the that we could see the increase in the salary that the officers would get. That's probably the majority of it. Yeah.
Sue?
Through the chair and Mr. Superintendent, I had an opportunity to look at this budget on late Friday. So when I sent you that email, or I sent forward the email, it was after seeing this document. And at first, at looking at it, from my take, it appears to be about 3.9 more than what we're currently paying for our officers. That's a 60% increase, 65% increase compared to what we're paying currently for doing the same thing. In addition, I understand you are looking at next year's budget, and you're comparing it to my current budget, which is the 4.8 million. A lot of folks have been stating 4.2 million. Well, that's prior year's expenditures, and I was very clear about that it was for last year's expenditures that you all were comparing, because I've heard that number a lot of times. So, but as you look at it, even for the projection, you're right, I cannot do projections because I don't know what the state is going to give me for funding. I'm not sure as far as the funding and how you guys receive your funding, if it's just strictly local dollars, but we receive our funding through the state once the legislature meets, and that is on an annual basis. So for me to be projecting next year's funding, it's a number pulling from the sky in the wall, because I don't know what our property values are going to be, what the state is going to give us for revenue based on our FTE. Remember, we operate based on FTE, butts in the seats. And there's a lot of other legislative action that's happening that's impacting our overall budget. So with that, I would say, if you look at our budget over the last 3 years or 4 years of using this mill money, and thank you taxpayers for it, because it's specifically for safety and security of our schools. The increases over the 3-4 years has not been over the 63% more. It has been about 3%. So yes, there are going to be increases over the next couple of years, and the increases are primarily for, compensation, of course, and any other contracts that may be occurring in that particular year. So with that, the second thing is that what I am concerned about is that, this is a temporary funding source. It is a 4-year revenue source for us. At any given time, once, after this is done, there's a possibility that, I'm not saying that it will, but there is a possibility that this funding will go away. And at that point, we're not just police, we're not just that one agency. We are a school district, and we take care of not only the police force, but we take care of our teachers. We take care of operations. We take care of so many other things. So we're a larger organization. Actually, I would say we're the #1 in the community providing employment to the community. And if those funds do go away, as the CFO, I have to, as a team, we have to manage and decide how are we going to absorb this cost into our already declining budget annually, every year. it goes down. You know, so that is also a huge cost that I am also concerned about, that we have to be able to control that cost. And I know, you know, contracts do, if it's external contracts, they are always higher than what we can do for the services. Some are needed and some, you know, we can do it ourselves, we can do it in-house, and some we can't. And typically those contracts are always, I would say 99.9% are always higher than what we have proposed, you know. And thirdly, of course, the other thing that I do want to say is that, yes, we do have a $21 million budget. That is a budget. It's estimated for this year. And who knows, if things go well, property values will increase and maybe it will go up about $2 or $3 million. That has been the trend. Although this year when we did the budget, the funds really, we had a huge higher property value. So therefore we generated a little more than what we have generated in the past. And, you know, a lot of times as the cost increase over the next couple of years, the purpose of our resolution and asking the taxpayer is to harden our schools, to provide safety and security of our buildings. So again, as we escalate the cost each year, our projects that we have already indicated in our EFP plan, which is a 5-year plan, I believe, right? Those projects would have to be looked at and possibly eliminated to support the cost for the services to the sheriff's office, when in fact we are doing it for a lot less. So, with that, I do want to say, end with this comment. I have worked for this school district for about almost 10 years. And throughout the 10 years I have worked here, I have always been very transparent with my figures. And as you know, we operate a school system, not just a department. And when we provide numbers, it is as detailed as I can get it. And my office and my staff and the team here, we have always been available for everyone to come to us and say, hey, I want to know exactly how much a pencil costs. We don't go that deep, but how much does, we talk about detailed expenditures, how much of the ammunition costs. I mean, I've got that information. You just need to ask for it. And at the time, the information that was provided to everyone from the team, it was given based on the information that what we thought you all wanted. So, I mean, I feel like we have given as much information as we can, detailed information, to provide to the sheriff's office so that they can provide the budget that you all have. One of the things I do have, I'm sorry, as I'm looking at this, you talk about the increase to the salaries. Can you tell me the benefits piece of it? How much the benefits would be per officer? Because you said starting PD base, the $41,560 versus the $50,000. Is that only salaries? And what is the additional benefits associated with that salary line?
So we calculate total compensation package. So you're correct, the figure was salary, but then we incorporated any incentive information that was provided to make sure that would continue. For example, if they have a college degree, they get a portion of incentive in their pay. We also calculated the taxes, the FRS contributions, and the benefits that we provide through the county, which are different from what they're receiving through the school board, and also workman's comp. So for example, a 3-year deputy would be making, gosh, the light in here is not the best. A 3-year deputy would be making $54,828, but total compensation with all the factors I mentioned, including incentive, FICA, FRS, benefits, workman's comp, is 87,973.
87,
And that's included in the
In our
PD
proposal.
personnel number?
Yes,
It's included.
it's all fully loaded, yes.
okay, yeah. The other thing, the other comment I wanted to make is, I know you all, excuse me, you all mentioned the idea of the liability insurance and auto insurance, that it was, might have been not included in our total cost, that we did not give the total cost of what it costs to operate our police department. I wanted to be clear, again, you all have just specifically a department. The way I look at it, it's a department that you're running. And yes, you do have to have your workers' comp and your liability insurance. From a district perspective, when we go out for our liability insurance, it is an umbrella policy. And that umbrella policy includes all staff. It includes everyone under that, and it looks at what is the risk of insuring our employees, which includes our teachers, administrators, custodians, nurses, every single one of our employees. So they're looking at it as a whole, not individually that it is the officer that I need to insure. And so that policy, when we get that policy, it covers everyone. Also, it also looks at our property values, our property values, and what exactly, how much is the cost to replace our building? What is the cost to replace our buses, our automobile, those types of things. And like I said, it's an umbrella policy, so they're looking at the risk overall as a school district, not as an individual agency that, that is out on the street. So from what my understanding of what I've been told over the last several years when we started this police department was that an officer that's within the school district sitting at a school building is very different than an officer that's on the street taking care of the services. So when they quote us on our risk factor, it is not as high as it would be as an officer being on the streets. So, and as it relates to the cost of it, it's an umbrella policy that has always been borne by the school district from an overall perspective. It's not, I don't break it out by fund to say that the mill money is going to pay this proportionate share because it's our police department. I don't say in federal or Title I. We have teachers that we're paying out of Title I. I don't break that out and say, all right, 80% or not 80, 40% of the teachers that are in our building are paid from Title I, so I am going to take 40% of that cost and apply it to my insurance policy. I don't do that. The reason I don't do that is because then I'm taking away from the money that could be going for instructional services. So from a district perspective, I look at those items that are standardized across the board that the district has to do because it's the cost of operating a school district. So to say that I did not include auto insurance or liability insurance, it's a false statement because it is there, but the mill is not paying for it. So I just wanted that to be clear. And again, as you all know, I'm all about transparency, and as a CFO, I am responsible to make sure that this school district, you, the school board, that we are fiscally responsible for every penny that we bring into the school district, and that we serve the students of our community, and we take care of our staff that's within the school district. That's all. Thank you.
So can I just,
Well, I just want to ask one question. Prior to 5 years ago, who was the safety and security, safety?
I was going to
and
say, Ms. Skipper, I was actually in Clay County Schools for 15 years with sheriffs. And so for me, when the apples and oranges, that's really not a problem for me. It's just not. I can tell you this. if you get out and you talk to constituents, which I do all the time, and you go to meetings and you openly listen to suggestions and criticism, when you present numbers like this, and this is, I know we're different, so it's not, it's a different scenario when it comes to the CFO job that you're doing for this organization. But I am telling you, when constituents see something like this, it is our job as a board and as a county, it will be, if we do this, the sheriff's job to ensure the taxpayers understand how every dollar, every dime of their money is spent. That is what this type of looking budget does. I do not have to be an expert to look down and say, oh, ammo costs, $48,000. When you look at, I believe, when you present transparency, when it comes to a specialized force of people, we will never have a problem with a 1% mill for safety. People are reasonable. That's what they want us to do with the money. And we invest the money in a way such as this, it improves, as my dad was a gambling man, the chances that you will receive the benefit of that 1% again. We cannot run afraid of what is best for our kids, because I will run rampant for the next 2-3 years and make sure our constituents understand the choices that we make and how our dollars are spent. If the mill was not passed, you have a problem either way, Dr. Legecko. Either way, whether it be 1 million more or 1 million less, okay? And so if that would be a time, you have to cross that bridge when it gets there, but it is our job to make sure that the taxpayer dollars, every single dime, is spent in transparency. It should be our job, if we were to go with it, that this dollar amount minus the 21 million is clear. I know we have, it's our job as a school board, Mr. Superintendent, to explain how every one of those dollars are being spent. As a teacher and as a grandmother and a mom, we may believe we're transparent and doing a good job communicating, but I can tell you we are not. When you talk to people, they do not understand it. If I carry this around in a briefcase, which I don't have, but I'm saying, or in my portfolio, this is what people see and understand. So regardless of what way this board goes, we have to do a better job of transparency in every single thing that we do. And just saying we do it is not enough. You remember when I called for Dr. Legecko to start talking about numbers and being more transparent. Statutorily, in legislation, we are bound to be transparent, and we are bound to make sure that our transparency is understood by our citizens. This is understood. So we do have a problem either way. And I remember when the sheriffs were there. When we opened Oakleaf, there were sheriffs in green outfits, my favorite color, green, and carrying. And when you had a brawl of 30, 40 people in the atrium, you know what works? You know what works? Having a sheriff. And I don't know, I got an email about how these people were not going to be connected to community, we're not going to be connected to the kids at school. Are you kidding me? They're families. They're human beings. They're highly trained and effective human beings who have families and personalities and would love any child the same way any of our people love a child. And so that's what I wanted to say.
Can I ask you? Prior to 5 years ago, who was our sole,
Just 1 second, Ms. Willa. Ms. Skipper's going to speak, and then I'll come to you.
who was our sole security?
Thank you.
Clay County, correct? That was prior to a 1 mil. So we had funding coming from what source? Where, was it general, was it state funded, what was
We
it?
were using both source of funds, general fund and Safe Schools funds.
Okay, which Safe Schools came from state, right?
Yes,
So
it's one of the
again-
categoricals that we received.
Okay, and what is it, 30% of the mill is paid towards, or will be paid towards safety and security? So the mill, you don't have to wait on the state to give, correct?
I don't know.
For the mill,
Uh-huh.
that's not based off of FTE.
It's
correct?
based off property
Separate.
value.
It is based
Right.
off the property values,
But I'm
based,
saying, she's saying that we can't do our budget because of FTE, but safety and security is completely different, is what I'm
Right, but
saying.
you still have to have your property values given to you by the state.
Right,
So
but
that's
the
what she's saying.
FTE is what I'm saying.
Yeah, FTE is
Doesn't matter.
separate.
Right, if
FTE does
Right.
matter, FTE
For the-
does
for the
matter
mill?
for the mill, yes, because
Oh.
they're using the property values to calculate the value of how much local property taxes that will contribute to the state FEFP. There's the state FEFP and there's the local FEFP. Every year, the legislature meets to determine what is that required local effort, millage, that is needed to accommodate
But what
the
I'm
cost.
saying, it's not based off of, is this child coming to school or not? Because everybody pays property taxes.
It is based on that because we are calculated based on the number of FTE that we receive. So for instance, if I'm projecting about 40,000 FTEs, for instance. Remember, FTE is not the same as butts in the seats,
No,
okay? It's
right.
two different things. But we could say we have 50,000 students around, but we're only going to get 40,000 FTEs because of the number of hours that they're spending in the classroom. The state uses that number to determine, okay, that's how much FTE you do receive. Then, of course, they take the value of our property and determine, okay, what is the proportionate taxes that needs to be contributed in order for them to generate X amount of dollars from the state dollars. So no matter what, you still, and you're right, property taxes is the baseline, one of the baselines to determine how much dollars we do receive.
Anything else, Ms. Gibbard? No. Ms. Bola?
Yeah, Sheriff, quick question. Are your officers in a union?
No, ma'am.
Okay, because ours have formed a union, and I'm not certain how that transition will work. That's something that we need to consider as well. And secondly, when we hire when we hire SROs, we hire experienced officers who want to come to schools. When, let's say, not all of our officers transition over to the sheriff's office for whatever reason. When we get SROs from the sheriff's office, will we be guaranteed experienced officers and not newbies out of the police academy?
No, so the thought is, at least during transition and potentially as a standard of practice, we would do what we call direct hire into that position, which means if somebody is an SRO somewhere else and wants to go directly into that job, we would direct hire them into that spot. The other thing that we have is we may have a veteran person who has done several jobs within the agency and says, you know, this is the next logical step for me, I'd really like to be an SRO. Then we would potentially board for that position, and then interviews are conducted, and then the best candidates that would be the best fit for that position are chosen.
Okay. I was not one of the people who was asking for this transition. I think you're aware of that. And I was around when we made the initial decision. Comments have been made that the school district is not in the business of having a police force. And I just want to remind the rest of the school board members that the ultimate responsibility, the legislature holds us responsible. We have to sign off on everything related to the safety and security of our schools. And if there's a situation where we don't have an officer in a particular location for whatever reason, that's on us. That's not on the sheriff's office, that's not on the school force, it is on us. Our ultimate responsibility is also fiscal. And I'm looking at $3 million plus out of that millage and we're all assuming, oh, we'll have that millage, no problem. We'll have the sheriff behind us. Everybody will say safety and security, yes, yes, yes. That millage passed by percentage points this past time around. And it is scary to rely on the goodness of the hearts of our citizens to say, of course they want safety and security. We have no clue what's going to happen in the next 3 years. We just got that millage by the skin of our teeth this last time, and we have a lot of support out there. We have a lot of support in the community. And it is very frustrating to rely on something like that and put a lot of dollars into something like that, or assume that we have those dollars to spend. Lastly, hardening of our schools is a continuous effort. And we need to make certain that we have the opportunity to harden our schools so that we can be the first, that can be the first line of defense for anyone. I say defense, and I'm saying fences throughout all of our schools. But we have to make certain that we have the first line of defense set so that the SROs, whoever they are, if they're a sheriff's officer or our own officer, has every capability of defending our schools in the case of an attack of any sort. And once again, I'm going to say it. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. Our SROs have done a phenomenal job. They are police officers. They are former police officers in other locations. They may have been SROs. They may have been retired from a police force. The sheriff's office. We got a number from the sheriff's office when we started up our police force. And the concern that I have that they are not considered police officers by some is outrageous to me. It's abysmal. I can't say enough how much I appreciate those officers and what they've done for us and what they do for our children and our staff and our schools. Because as soon as we hardened those schools and as soon as we started those police officers, we cut down on a lot of crimes that were happening at the schools immediately. And a lot of the history isn't considered here. I understand that people think that the sheriff's office is the only line of defense. Well, they're wrong, because we've had a line of defense now for 4 years, and it's been incredibly successful. Dr. Levetko, I'm hearing that people want a line-by-line item. So I guess that might be a benefit that we might want to start working on for budgeting in the future. And we can look at different budgets from throughout the county, from throughout the school district, as to what we spend and why we spend it the way we do. If that's what the board wants, we may want to start doing that at some of our workshops and start doing line-by-line items for everything. I think you do a fine job of showing us how the mill is spent, and you have the nickname of Dr. No for a good reason. I think that's all I have to say at this point. I am very hesitant to give, first of all, to assume that we have that money, and secondly, to give the responsibility to another service. Thank you.
Ms. Bull, I just want to say, I hope you're not suggesting we don't understand the magnitude of what we've been discussing and the amount of professionalism, my personal experience for years in the classroom working with SROs. I want you to understand there's no one sitting here saying that our SROs are not doing a good job. Because that rhetoric, that's rhetoric. And no one wants them to leave either. This is a business decision that the board is able to make without all the feelings, if it's the right thing for us. And that's, I promise that's all I'm going to say.
Well, I'm going to say one more thing because I'm still at a loss dollar-wise. I think you mentioned, it was a 3.9 difference?
Yeah. 3.1.
I'm not seeing it, so I need help.
Okay,
I don't see,
Okay,
if they're coming in at 6.1, and that's doing it all, because even if you look at the other, we still have to add the costs of the MOU. but I'm not seeing, if it's 3.1, then we're saying it only costs us 3 mil.
Transition money?
The transition cost, if you
Right,
take the
that's a
difference
one-time.
between the 4.8 and the 6.1, and the 1.7 and the 42,000, it is the transition cost, the vest replacement, and the difference between the 6.1 and the 4.8.
What is the thing with the transition cost? Is that
That's a
something we get
one-time, that's what we have to do to
back?
convert vehicles, titles.
Pre-employment screening. So even though the officers are currently employed as law enforcement officers, they would have to transition to our agency, and there are requirements to transition to a different agency. So the transition costs include the pre-employment stuff. It also includes a very modest, borderline cheap transition of vehicles. And then it includes every item on the sheet of paper, understanding that this is if we had to start from zero, if nothing came with the officers, no personal equipment. So as Vicki stated, if gun belts can come over, then we cross gun belts off. If guns can come over, then we cross guns off. That would be a top-end transition cost, considering we would start from zero.
And somewhere in here it says our officers are making 41. That's not correct. It's not this year's numbers. So that would create a disparity between our number and the sheriff's number, right? I saw 41 something. What do we
That was
make?
just from our salary schedule. The actual, I've included in the packet that was given
As
to
of
you,
May.
every person and what they make. So
What is our
typical,
starting
it was
salary
about
as of May after bargaining? Was it 43 something?
Brenda, do you know?
Because that brings our cost closer to theirs when we adjust current numbers.
Well, no, so our projection, the personnel cost is actual costs of what we actually pay our officers now. So that, again, this is a projection, probably has a percentage wrapped into that from the 22 to the 23, 24.
I think what I'm saying is their budget is projected on,
Next year.
Ours is projected on another year. So if we were even to do like another 5% on top of what we have projected for this year, we're only talking $5 million, which is still a $3 million difference in the price.
I'm going to take offense to the conversation about 3 million. There is a one-time transition cost. Right? But the working cost, our actual working cost for next year, if you were to keep the MOUs in place, would be 5.6. Not, and I don't know why people keep saying 3 or 3.9. Listen, this is revenue neutral for us. We're not here to make money, and I don't, and I have a lot of respect for what you guys do. You have a big organization. But, you know, we were asked to come here. Our position is revenue neutral with a line item cost, and it is what it is. But we are not $3 million more. Do we pay more? Yes. Do our benefits a little bit cheaper? Yes. Is something going to cost a little bit more on our side? Potentially. Could it cost a little bit more on your side? Potentially. You know, I don't want to get wrapped around the number of 3 million, because I will not be framed as somebody who's coming in and asking for money. If there's any money left over at the end of the year, we give it back. That's the law. The 1.7 is a top-end transition one-time cost.
Right.
And from what I'm understanding from what you're saying, the 1.7 is the most that the transition
Yes,
would
ma'am.
cost. So the itemized budget, if we started deleting things, that number would come down.
Yes, ma'am. So gun belts, firearms, rifles, all the attachments that come on.
it's projected cost as well. So you have in here, vest replacements, 2425, which we would have to do
You have to do
anyway.
anyway, yes.
Vehicle fleet replacement, eventually we would have to do that as well. And then the smart defibrillators, we just really need
That
those.
is really probably the only add-on, would be, we do assign an AED with the pediatric pads, to our deputies, and so we would want to make sure that any SRO that work for our agency had those, and that is the one add-on.
And I would say, maybe this is the nurse coming off of me, but I was a huge advocate of Narcan being in our schools. And then when they mentioned this, I had no idea that our cars didn't even have this. So when you have an event at a school, at an elementary school, God forbid something happens, to be able to have an AED relatively available, and I know, our schools have them, right? Yeah. But the time to go run inside of a school to get it, and you're outside at an event, you can just pop your trunk and have it. When you're doing CPR on a child, on an adult, time is of the essence, and that's really time is of the essence. So, when Sheriff actually had stated that, the nurse in me got excited because I feel as though that should be best practice and something that we should be doing anyway. So, my mind went into a million different directions.
Don't we have them in each of our schools?
They're in the school.
Yes, right, but I just stated, that's why I just said if, you have it in the
But they're
nurse's
not,
office.
and the sheriff, our SROs are generally not sitting in their cars, so they are in schools getting them.
Did you not hear my scenario, Ms. Bola, did you not
Yeah,
hear my
I did.
scenario? I said
Yes,
if
I
you're
did.
outside at an event, at an elementary school, normally
Which
the
they're outside, yeah.
festivals, all kinds of stuff, normally the doors are locked, right? So now you have to have a SRO or somebody go unlock a door, run in, grab an AED, which is normally locked up somewhere in a glass container, unless we do it differently. Now you have somebody out there doing CPR on a child, that's several minutes could go by, depending on how fast that individual could run. If the door unlocks immediately, if they can even find the AED. My point is they know exactly where it's at, they can go grab it, and things can be done immediately. Because then you have to apply the pads and many steps.
Might I say it's best practice? I did some research on this.
Correct.
It
That's
is
what I
best practice.
Stated.
So,
I just, she's either not hearing my voice because I'm across the room, or she's.
Okay, is there anything further from the board?
no.
Mr. Brodsky?
I heard you, Ms. Flipper, thank you.
No, I would just give the team, first let me just say yes, the district team worked hard on this. I want to give the opportunity for any other questions from the district team related to this.
Yeah, I have a question. Is this the only way that you would be willing to partner with us? Is there other models, like if you would be able to partner just in the secondary schools?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Okay, why not?
Best practice, when this conversation first started, I reached out to my colleagues across the state, and I'm a big believer in best practice, and just because somebody else is doing it doesn't make it right. When you're talking continuity of communication, continuity of policy, continuity of response, continuity of supervision, continuity of investigations, all of those things that are critical, one policy, one chain of command, all of that needs to be in place. And that is my opinion based upon 31 years of law enforcement.
But you're still willing to partner with Green Cove and Orange Park?
They are standalone full-service agencies, yes, ma'am.
Sheriff, can I ask a quick question?
Yes,
What's
ma'am.
a full-service agency in comparison to what we have?
Dispatch, investigators, crime scene technicians, patrol, like they have patrol that can respond to the area immediately, internal affairs. I think you guys, I'm not sure if you guys have a standalone internal affairs person. That's just some examples, Ms. Bola, and I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. But they're agencies like that are considered full service.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Chair, I also just want to say something as well that, which has been said, Ms. Hanson harped on it, and even Ms. Bola had harped on it. And I had said it in a previous meeting that at the end of the day, it's us who are going to ultimately be responsible for the safety and security of the children of Clay County, period. And we have to look at best practice. We have to look at what is best for the kids of Clay County. And I will tell you this, if you go and read grand jury reports, if you go and talk to other districts across the state, there are some who are actually transitioning back to their sheriff life, like I, as one of 5, would like to do. There are reasons for this. And it's not just because, you just wake up one day and think, oh, that would be a great idea. There's actual evidence that supports this decision. So, again, I will repeat it till I'm blue in the face. It's not a dollar amount for me, it's about the safety and security of our children. And again, going and doing your research and the footwork, you will see that all of this is supported in that. So, and that will be the last.
Ms. Skipper, if you could share some of that evidence with Mr. Blacker so he could share it with us, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you can also just Google it too, the grand jury reports, but yeah, sure, we can get it over to you.
Mr. Brodsky, anything further from your staff? I have questions from the audience that I'm going to recognize when we...
Bryce is still,
Oh, sorry, yes.
The other option that I've seen from some other districts were partnering, like if we only want 180 days in the school. Is that something that the BOCC would be willing to work with us on? Like they would, in the summertime or in the off hours, they would be for the county, and then we would have the 180 days bell to bell.
You know, in thinking about this, I think the 365-day model is a clearer line when it comes to if you're using this millage rate that was defined for safety and security, using that millage rate for safety and security. And so operationally, if you look at how many weeks are in a summer, typically your SROs take off vacation, there's ongoing training that has to happen, and then there's very little time. So there's nowhere else really operationally that they would be effective for me. So the operation, their daily duties during off time would be at the schools, maybe for early morning feeding or involved in kids events around the county, at the schools. You know, we even talked a little bit about, you know, having them out at the Police Athletic League to engage in the kids that they normally are seeing at school. So this would be a group that would be 100%, barring any catastrophic event, geared towards school safety, kids building relationships and interaction.
Okay. And I don't mean any disrespect saying that you're spending $3 million more. I'm simply just trying to do my job and look at the numbers, trying to be a good steward of money, and that's also operationally. From my point of view, again, we're looking at what do we have to cut. So safety projects is something that the board would have to look at, and we'll have to look at which ones we don't do when.
Well, if we could come up with a 3 mil and see that it's that much of a difference, we'll look at that. Because I'm not seeing it. I'm still not seeing it.
It's just the first year transition cost.
Exactly, the first.
Yeah, so if we move into year 2, then I get $1 million.
No, but it's still money. I mean,
It is
it's
still
still projects to me. That's
Great.
And when I bring up insurance, it's because if it's not district, that cost isn't there to the district. Our liability policy then is lower. So there's a savings, and that's what
We did talk to Gallagher, and they said that adding the police department or taking it away is nominal. The figure is, because we're such a large district,
Sure.
that number.
And I'm not used to not seeing a policy that doesn't break it down by category like you do with workers' comp. So even if they don't do that anymore, there's still a cost, and even though it's
Sure.
nominal.
But that's just the value of being a larger
Sure.
price.
But I still don't know what that number is. And so that's the accountant in me. I want to see what makes up the number and make sure, are we close or are we not close? And right now, I don't know.
As it relates to the liability insurance, I did reach out to my contact with Arthur Gallagher, who happens to be our third-party policyholder. And I did ask them if we were to transition, and what would the cost be, or what would I save from all of this? And they told me it would be no more than $10,000. So the savings would be about $10,000 from a $2 million policy premium, which I did present to you all at the budget hearing, giving you all the details of what is included in that policy. So,
Then
that's
we get car
the,
insurance. We know gas is going up, so again. Anyway.
do you have anything else? Actually, I do have one, and it's more about a comment that Ms. Bola mentioned. And she did say that as a board, you all would like to see more detailed information through workshops, of course. But for me to do a detailed budget document, a detailed budget for all of the items that we take care of, you guys might plan on being here for like 2 days, 3 days. And so what I would ask is that moving forward, if you could, through the superintendent, that you would pick and choose what areas that you would like me to provide you with a line-for-line detailed budget and expenditures, because we are spending money right now, and I will be happy to present that to you as part of our agenda through our workshop.
Do we not have it, this is like, if I came to you and I was like, I just would like to see the CTE line item budget.
Yes.
You can't just click print?
No.
So there's not, well, I know,
I'm
that was kind of
sorry.
facetious, but what I'm saying
Yeah,
is,
no, it's not that.
it's not already generated?
By fund.
No.
So my
We have
question to you
multiple
is, there's programs out there
Right.
that actually you key this in and you can press print as you go. So that's what I'm saying. Why, my question is do we need to buy programs?
So
For
Ms.
this to
Gifford,
happen.
no, I think, so.
And that was being facetious. I know
I
you
know.
can't just go file, press print. But my point is to keep up with it instead of having to generate it or create it, and it's taking you, it's crippling your work that you're already doing, and it's taking you days to do it. So
Yeah.
that's what I mean. Is there a program? I don't mean,
Yeah,
I forget that some
Yeah,
people
no.
mean literal.
yeah,
So we implemented Business Plus
right.
in
16, 15, 16, around there.
So that, prior to that, we were still in a DOS operating system.
Right.
Well, I feel like we're still there. I mean, I feel
I
like we're
understand.
still
I understand.
in,
But what I'm
the
telling
nineties,
you,
the
there has been a
eighties
lag.
with our documentation. And I mean, that's kind of scary a little bit on an audit perspective or on a, I know we do what we have to do to get by, but I mean, the transparency that Ms. Hanson and I are referring to, it should be essentially as easy as a click of a button. I mean, if we're being honest.
We could print operationally what the police department has line item by line item as far as purchase services. It'll give you a number. If you want to know what every purchase order was within that number, that's kind of where we would have to do the digging, because our program that we have now does not allow us to.
And that's what
To
I'm
break
saying,
it out.
do we need to spend money up front to get these programs for full transparency? But I don't wanna waste any more Sheriff Cook's time, so let's
Yeah,
just
I know.
focus on, cause she's got a county to run.
Yeah.
Well, all I ask is that if the board can at least direct to what you would like to see at each workshop, I will be happy to do that and present to you all exactly what you'd like to see.
And I don't
Because
think we're
again-
gonna be that crazy.
Huh?
I don't think we're gonna be that crazy, it's just, we're trying to get a handle for 90 days on costs on both sides, and it's just frustrating. I mean, I'm not finding many reports that
That's
are
why we need
even,
a
Yeah.
program system.
that are
90
even
days. 90 days
piggybacking
for
from each other.
That's insane.
All right, anything further from the board? Anything further from the superintendent and staff?
Anything else on teams?
All right, at this time, I'm going to take audience questions. I have one from Ms. Kidwell.
So first I want to start out by saying I have the utmost respect for law enforcement. I have 3 people in my family who are sheriffs. Given the unique needs of Clay County District Schools in that we're talking about really kind of a restorative justice, right? I mean, we have goals to educate, and our officers are the same way. They educate, they provide guidance and goals, and it's like a restorative justice kind of thing in our schools. We don't want to funnel the the school to prison pipeline like, sometimes people talk about. And our officers do a great job of building those relationships like you talked about. And is there any conflict that you see, or how does this conflict with the goals of law enforcement on the street, where they have a different mindset? I know because I have 3 of them in my family. They have a different mindset when they encounter a lawbreaker or someone who is, there's just a different way of looking at things than there is in the school system. And I'm wondering, how is that going to work? Is there a conflict there? Do you see a different policy maybe for our school officers than maybe for your law? Is there any kind of change, or would it just be the same?
No, ma'am, I don't think there's a conflict, because it goes back to picking the right people for the job, and whether somebody is an SRO or a detective or a street deputy, you pick the right people for the job, And in our profession, we have discretion. And so, an SRO, a detective, a deputy on the street, all has discretion, and we give them that discretion on how to handle things. And if you have a philosophy of, and I think I've proven that. I mean, you can still be tough on crime, but have a soft hand to help those who want help. And I think that that's just a philosophy that would continue. I don't see that changing, especially when in discretionary nuisance crimes and misdemeanors, we have a lot of leeway of things that we can do. Now, felonies, there's no leeway. Like if somebody commits a felony, we got to take legal action. But you pick the best people for the position, you put the best supervisors over them, and then it's, a top-down management approach of working with people, especially kids, to, hold them accountable. And accountable could be go to jail, get a citation, something happens within the school system, a detention. To me, it would be business as usual.
Ms. Higginbotham?
I also have friends in law enforcement, including a sheriff, but my question is, first, I've heard everyone, I believe, in this room, either last time I was here or this time, talk about what a great job our current people in position are doing. So if they're doing a great job and we're looking out for the safety of children, and that's the reason we want to switch, why are we switching or considering switching if we think the people who are already doing the job are doing a great job? That's my first question. My second is the advocate in me. The officers, in my understanding, the officers in the school now are currently 10-month employees. So they would be going to a 365 position, and I know they're going to get a raise. Oh, they are 12? Okay, I'm sorry, my question's irrelevant.
So your question was for the board, I'm understanding?
Yes. Why are we considering changing if we're all seem to be happy with what we're doing now?
Does anyone want to speak to that?
I think I've been very clear since the beginning, since I brought this to the board, that whole night. There's a variety of issues that I have seen, from our dispatch to reporting to best practice, evidence that support best practice. I come from a career nursing that if you're not up to date on best practice, that's people's lives in danger, and I know the severity of that. The policies in place, I feel just a variety. I mean, I think I've expressed it since day one. I've been very, very transparent on how I feel and
So you're
I
saying
still-
that I'm sorry, misunderstanding you then. You're saying that you're not happy with the way that the
Ms.
current system
Higginbotham,
works. I'm
you
sorry.
can ask one question and the board can respond.
And I can answer. I'm a military wife, married to an Army Ranger, spent some time on a SWAT team in New York City. For me, it's the type of leadership and the type of organization. And I'm going to tell you exactly what that means. In the military, if you want to do a sworn statement, you fill out a DD-214. We don't really have regular documents, record keeping. I know because I've been asking for certain things maybe over the last 3 months, and if you want to know more detail, I would love for you to email me your number and I will meet with you. It is no problem, and bring everything that I'm talking about. But I can tell you right now, if we have a sheriff and there's a felony committed, let's say a sexual battery, that report, with consistency, like the military, will be done on certain forms, certain individuals will be called in. It's almost congruent, like across the country, what happens when you have certified police forces. That's what it is for me. Every single time you ask for something, it's there. Every single time you need a document, it's there. Every time you need an official form, it's there. They do public disclosures. They post, even when juveniles without names, if I'm not correct, everything that happens, you can go online and read about it. What happened over the weekend, what kind of arrests were made. That, for me, is the type of leadership. If it wasn't, then I would ask them to get rid of our PD. But that is not what we're saying. What we're saying is, it's about leadership for me, organization, and consistency, which law enforcement accredited agencies do very, very well, versus a new agency. I would call us new, right, in the last 3.5 years. So it has always been about that for me, transparency, leadership under one person, openness, consistency, and congruent from school to school.
Anything further? Thank you, Sheriff Cook, for being with us today. We appreciate you. We're going to take a quick recess and let the Sheriff's Department get on their way, and then we'll come back to order. So at this time, we're recessed.
Ms. Troutman, you wanted to say?
I was gonna say, the starting salary is 43,015.
41.
43,15.
With the new
contract.
Oh, you need to pound that gavel.
All right, we're gonna pick back up with business. So at this point, I think we probably as a board need to decide on an agenda item for the November board meeting. I've heard from a couple of board members. At this point, we don't have a document that we could vote on, so, and Mr. Blocker, you can help me out here. My inclination would be that we would place an item on the agenda to ask the superintendent to begin negotiating a contract that we can then vote on at our next regular meeting. So they would have a month to figure out the financing, all the things that go into negotiating a contract and making sure that our I's are dotted, T's are crossed. I know there's several entities, several agencies that have to weigh in on this between the school district, the sheriff's office, the BCC. I think our contract would be technically with the BCC. So I think allowing us to have a vote on that and then giving them that time to come up with something that we can then finalize at the December board meeting seems reasonable to me. Does that seem reasonable to all of you? And Mr. Blocker, would that keep us all above board and legal?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. And thank you, Madam Chair. I think you've explained it perfectly. I think just to kind of refine it a little bit, I think the decision today for the board would be to decide whether, and Mrs. Bowl, I understand, but I want to make sure I'm speaking clearly enough for you to hear as well. The decision today would be.
I can hear you.
Thank you, ma'am. Would be to place as an agenda item on November 2nd, the board meeting agenda, and the agenda item would essentially to ask the superintendent to enter into contract negotiations with the Sheriff's Department at that 2nd November meeting. Now, a couple of things, just kind of legal framework to consider. There are a number of issues that we want to identify. We want to identify a scope of services, some of which has been outlined, but we want to refine that a little bit. A final price point, I think what we've talked about today was there was a little bit of a fluctuating as far as the transition price, but I think we'd want to maybe the board to empower the superintendent and whatever negotiating team that he would set up to identify what those are, give some parameters, give the board I don't want to use the word direction, but ask him, set some parameters what the board would be comfortable with, just like you would in any negotiation. Say we're comfortable working within these parameters, maybe if we can get that transition cost a little bit lower, kind of operate within that framework. But again, we want to identify the scope, what a price would be, the length of the contract. There are a couple of outside factors that weigh in on this. You have a sales or a school safety tax that comes up for renewal over a certain period of time. I believe it's in the next 3 to 5 years. There's also, we have a budget to work with the county commission to work with as well. So it's going to take some coordination with the county commission, because the way the budgets work, and Dr. Gecko could probably outline this much clearer than I could. I think you heard Mrs. Adams talk about it. So the calendars for the county commission who funds the school, I'm sorry, the county commission actually funds the sheriff's budget. So they approve the sheriff's budget, they fund it, and the sheriff goes in front of the county commission for approval. And that's based on a combination of sales tax to an extent, but most importantly, your ad valorem taxes. That schedule is different than the school board revenue, which, as Dr. Gecko has outlined, comes from a different funding source. Revenue is generated, flows through, and goes to Tallahassee where it's assigned. So there's a little bit of some coordination we need to do, which is very common. The school districts that do this with the counties work it out. It just takes a lot of coordination, a lot of kind of working through. Is the revenue going to go directly to the county commission, and then is it reimbursed a certain way, or does it go directly to the sheriff's department? So those are some details we would want to work out and really understand. But I think the most important thing today for an agenda item is we want to make sure that we give some clear direction to, one, if you even want to put this as an agenda item, but if you do, then some parameters. So really, Mr. Bronski, who will represent the board in the negotiations, has some parameters. So as an example, do we want to try to negotiate a better price? I mean, there's several prices and options here that were kind of outlined, but do we want to try to work on, because there were some potential variables that were outlined here, so, we can kind of go through and identify that, but this is kind of where we want to give y'all, if you have a decision, is to give some clear direction to, Mr. Brodsky.
So yeah, we'll form a team of people, and obviously the CFO, yourself, and I will be on the team. And any typical contract has a, 3 ingredients, which is the scope of the work, what's the expectation of the work, right? Making it clear that the officer needs to be there statutorily from time to time based on Stoneman Douglas. The price cost is another part of a typical contract, as well as the terms of the contract. This is kind of a unique contract and position, and therefore the terms, such as reporting structure and other items, would have to be worked out over time. So yeah, it would take more than a couple days, for sure, in order to work all of that out.
Do we approach this like they're a vendor? Is that what we're saying? Develop a contract, negotiate?
No, it's an MOU. It's more of a memorandum of
It's an
understanding.
interlocal agreement.
Interlocal agreement. Sorry, not
But it
MOU.
also would
Because as an entity, they do what they do, right? I mean, we're not, we have choices, I know, I saw the 3 columns.
Well, one of the things that, if Madam Chair, if I may, so that's correct, Mrs. Hanson, you're correct. This is not a vendor that we can negotiate. So
Yeah.
the sheriff also has, because she does a report, but the funding is approved by the county commission, she is limited
Yeah.
in her negotiating ability to a point. Where I think the real negotiating would come in is where you have the transition costs, where there's potentially some variables. She's gonna have her limitations based on the budget that was just approved by the county commission. This is where, some, I don't wanna use the word direction, but guidance maybe to Mr. Brodsky is, how the price could maybe fluctuate. The other thing to consider as well, because it's a interlocutory agreement, there's gonna be some set terms that are gonna go into those that are required by statute. So, but it is gonna potentially, for scheduling purposes, it may work best to, if y'all's decision is to put it on the agenda for November 2nd, to have a reporting back in December where we can come back and report and update the board at the workshop for December on where we are in negotiations. That can allow for some additional feedback if necessary, and then, allow for maybe into January. I know there's interest in, if this decision is made, to do it in a timely manner, but that would maybe allow some flexibility. The superintendent can report back in a public meeting for transparency, kind of update where we are in this.
So, Mr. Blocker, with
Yes,
this
ma'am.
letter of intent that we asked the sheriff for, doesn't not the board have to decide about the 3 columns? Wouldn't the negotiating go forward based on what column we choose to operate in?
Yes,
I
ma'am.
think we could give that ask to the superintendent, right? That
Yes,
when we're
ma'am.
asking him to negotiate, this is the model that we're interested in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the model we're interested in.
Today, before we can do the letter of intent.
Oh, I don't.
I don't know that we would need to. I spoke to the sheriff's general counsel. He and I are in communication. I think, whatever y'all's interest is, I will express to him, and I think he will actually be generating that letter. But I think, from speaking with him, they wanted to have something that was responsive to whatever request we made to do. I think Mrs. Clark, was very eloquent in her ask of, hey, we'd like something, a letter of intent with some basic terms. Their position, I believe, is that these are some basic terms, but I think, there's a lot here that we'd want to kind of, again, the length of this. Is this a 1-year, agreement? Is it a 3-year agreement? There's some of those things I think we would need y'all to give some guidance to Mr. Brodsky. Do we want to start with a 5-year agreement that maybe transcends the upcoming sales tax, and I think the next 3 years, also elections, the length, the durability, and some of the, all which can be worked out. All these are details that can be worked out. But maybe we could start with that if the board could get some feedback to Mr. Brodsky, and I don't want to speak for you, but maybe we can start with the length. Is there interest or thoughts on the parameters of the length of the?
I personally would not be comfortable with just a 1-year agreement. I think it needs to be.
It's too much cost.
Yes, correct. So
I'm good with 5.
3 to 5 years.
Yeah, 3 to 5.
Is that agreeable for you, Ms. Clark? Ms. Bola is 3 to 5 years.
One of the challenges with 5, if you look at it from a different way, is that the 1 mil is up again in what year?
3 years.
In 3 years. So does that mean that you're on the hook for that encumbrance if that money is not there? That would be a challenge just as a negotiator.
Well, we still have to come up with the funds for safety and security. So we need to be proactive instead of reactive, and this is one of those examples that I'm talking about that maybe our CFO could be looking at now. Where are we gonna get additional funds? Obviously, they're not gonna be the correct numbers because we can't project 5 years, 3 years in advance. But if that mill does not pass, either way, no matter where we go, like Ms. Hanson said, you have to figure it out, and where is it gonna come from? Because it still has to come, and we still have to implement safety and security within our district. So whether we sit here and talk about the mill or not, we still have an issue that maybe we need to be addressing right now for plans in the future. But I don't think that that necessarily needs to be a factor in this, as much as you all think from an outside perspective, because the funding still has to come in from somewhere, and we still have to pay for these officers.
I totally understand, but that means you have to decide what program would be cut in order to do that, right? So even when you're looking at the 1 mil overall, and you're looking at the mill, you're saying, okay, we want the sheriff, let's pretend we want the sheriff's office. Then there's safety and security projects that need to be canceled in order to afford the additional cost. And that puts the board in a delicate, but I view my role as also kind of protecting the board and the district in all of this. And when you look at that, some of the decisions that would have to be made would be what school doesn't get X. Whether it's upgraded cameras, whether it's panic alarm systems, whether it's, you gotta like say that, like, hey, we're not providing upgraded cameras to X school.
But I do think this board is capable of making that decision, and if I was a betting girl, if I were rolling dice right now, we do a good job, and we do the right thing with our funds, and we are a public entity that has transparency and communicates. I honestly do not believe the citizens of Clay County are gonna say, oh, I just don't like it. That's just not the way it works when you talk to the people as for what Ms. Skipper was saying about money, we already know with scholarships and a lot of other things, we need to be looking at cutting programs anyway. That's just, there is a lot of hard decisions to be made in the next 3 years. And for me, making those decisions about the security of our kids is not as tough as making decisions about something else. Safety decisions are easier. They're easy for the public to understand. And I really, him hawing around like we're just indecisive is probably not the best way to look as a board. Because there's always outside parameters like what if 10,000 kids left next year on a scholarship? What if we lose another 20 million on scholarships? I mean, the what ifs can go on forever. I just think we need to do the best decision as a board, with your guidance, of course, for our kids.
Well, I think 3 years is reasonable.
Yeah.
That's not a short-term agreement. And at the same time, we're not promising money that we haven't yet figured out where it's going to come from. So, you know, if the sheriff is gonna stand up an entire division that is responsible for our schools, I think the numbers that we were given were very clear. We know what to expect. I think, you know, having that same sort of, she knows what to expect from us. We can't promise money that we are not, can't, you know what I'm saying? We can't allocate money that is not guaranteed to us, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I think 3 years for contract, or not contract, or agreement, whatever we're calling it, would be a good place to start. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but
What do you think? Ms. Clark, what do you think? I know you've researched a lot.
I think 3 is a good starting place. It gives us a chance to see the performance and evaluate it. And I'm back to, I don't know that it's really gonna cost any different. And we're back to, I mean, the hope is that the SROs that are there stay in place, and that's why I'm still for Orange Park and Green Cove staying there. I mean, they've built this rapport with the children, and I don't want to see that change. But you're right. I mean, whether the millage passes or not, we're required to have an SRO.
We're required to have under the statute a safe
Right.
school officer.
Which could be a
Could
guardian.
Which could be a guardian.
That's significantly.
But is that
less
what
cost.
we're willing to do? You know, and that's one of those tough questions we're gonna have to
That's
decide
the
on.
only reason why I'm proposing 3, is
Mhm.
because I don't want to guarantee money that I don't know I have.
And I think that gives, obviously, we would all rather have a uniformed officer on campus. But 3 years from now, that board, whoever's on that board, will have to make that decision. Are we going to save money by having guardians, or are we going to, you know what I'm saying, if the millage goes away, I don't want to take away an option from that board, because I don't know who's going to sit on that board, right? And at that point.
3 years, I agree with 3 years.
I think 3 years is reasonable. Ms.
I just
Bolt?
want to stress though that we can't just keep bringing up the mill factor because that's going to be a problem no
It is.
matter what. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean?
It is,
And
yes.
relying on this funding source is a problem, period. It's just like, you know, in your own house and when you do your own finances. If you rely on something that's not always going to be there to pay your house payment, I mean, that's a problem.
But in essence, that's our entire budget, Ms. Skipper.
Right, and I understand that, but I'm just saying, we have to have other options. We have to say, okay, we have to have backup plans.
Well, I will,
If A, B, and C don't work out, where's D, E, and F?
and in that same vein, we had a conversation 3 years ago with the previous board, when this millage was coming up. What are we going to do if it goes away? And I think Ms. Clark, you were part of that conversation. I know Ms. Bola was. And at that time, there was direction given by the board to not budget all of that money to be spent, but to save some of it so that at least for a year, if the millage goes away, we have operations covered while we're figuring it out for the following year. So, you know, that has been our practice. I would have to ask Dr. Legato if that's still our practice, that we're not spending all of the mill money.
That is correct.
So there is money there that's not been allocated.
That's all I wanted to stress, is that we're looking proactively instead of the last final hours and we're freaking out because we don't know, you know, where funds are gonna come from, what we're gonna do.
No, but
where
I
it's
wouldn't
gonna-
say, I mean, there's still tough decisions that would have to be
Right.
made because the operating costs will eventually exceed what we were able to save over the short period of time that we had that revenue stream. But it does buy you time to figure it out.
And in all honesty, there's a lot of counties that don't have a 1% mill for safety, and we could also do some studies and figure out how they make that work, so.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. I mean, I think it was clear today through all the discussion that there's a plethora of ways of providing safety and security to schools across the state, and everybody does it a little differently, so. But to your point, Ms. Skipper, I'm always in favor of best practice. So, that being said, I think we've determined the length of,
Can we just?
oh, Ms. Bola, are you in agreement on the length of the contract?
3 years sounds good.
Okay. So then,
So the other item that seems like a big one for discussion would be the LEAs with Orange Park and Green Cove.
Madam Chair, if I could.
yes.
So I would put that under scope,
Okay.
to put it in a category. So again, this is kind of where I think if the board is comfortable giving some direction a little bit, and the options we have here are, if you look on, I think it's the tab 8.
Yes, Tabby.
Mrs. Ball, I apologize, I know you don't have this in front of you, but we have the two options here. One is CCSO, all schools with law enforcement MOUs. That would include Orange Park and Green Cove, I believe, if I'm reading this correctly. And then the other option, so we can do this option A and B. So option A would be CCSO takes over all schools, that would be option A. And then for discussion purposes, and then option B would be a CCSO, all schools with law enforcement MOUs with Orange Park and Green Cove Springs. Does that make sense?
And I'm with Ms. Clark. Those two cities have a close working relationship with us and the schools that they serve. In addition, the dispatch will still run through the sheriff, so it'd be one central dispatch. So I agree with Ms. Clark about the community connections with those 5, that's what it is, 2 and 3, I believe, 2 and 3 officers.
I'm fine with that also.
I see on the organizational chart is 2 for, is it Green Cove, and 3 for Orange Park?
I do have a question on that. At the schools where we have Orange Park Police and Green Cove Police, have call-outs been an issue? Are they able to cover if the assigned deputy is not available?
Yes,
Okay.
there's
not been an
has
issue.
not been a time since the starting of the police department where we didn't cover school.
Okay, then I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be best practice for her to have all schools, but part of this was community relations with me. So, I'm okay with that, especially starting off and getting our, transition. I think it would be
I
less
think that
impactful
would- yes.
on our kids and, departments, and I think it just would be a smoother process.
And it seems like it would be less expensive transition costs as well. We're not transitioning those officers, so we'll save some money on that. It wouldn't, obviously, you're still paying those salaries, we don't realize the cost savings there, but it would be a cost savings on that portion. Ms. Bola, do you have anything to add to that?
My other question is this including the charter schools?
Oh, that is a good question.
I think we should,
Are they included in these numbers, though?
oh, I don't know.
The charter schools are not
No,
included in the
because we
numbers that we have.
Because we just.
Part of that millage goes to the charter schools separately. And neither, I want to stay with Orange Park and Green Cove, but neither of those agencies are certified either. So the argument that our school police department is not certified really doesn't hold water.
We weren't talking about that.
Accredited you're referring to, Ms. Paul?
Yes.
Isn't Green?
Thank you, that's the term, sorry.
So how many officers do we have total? She's not accounting for the charter schools when she says 44.
Yeah, I think that's the director, but she's doing 43 sites, is what this
It's
is.
42 besides
No, it's 43.
I thought it was 43, they're counting 42. on this
So I guess the question then would be, does this board want to, regardless of who provides, whether it's the school district police department, Clay County Sheriff's Office, Orange Park, Green Cove, do we want to, as a board, take that expense on?
Mr. Russ,
And I
what
don't know if
currently
that's-
happens with the charter schools? They get part of our money for safety and
Charter schools get part of
security.
the money, and charter schools choose how they want it.
So that would be their decision then?
Be their decision.
Right, so what we know for sure is our sites.
Correct.
And they would still get their money
They
and
still
make
get
their own
money,
choices.
And they make their own choices.
I like that they make their own decision, because you don't.
Well, they're doing that now, I think, right? Making their own
Correct.
decision.
Ms. Paul?
Ms. Bola, did you have an opinion on that?
I would continue just giving the charter schools the money that they're currently getting out of the millage. There's still legislative rule on any millage that we take in that a certain percentage has to go to the charters. And that way they can determine how they're going to do their own safety and security in that respect. And we would just do the 43, we have 43 schools right now.
Right.
So we would just cover the 43 schools.
Ms. Bola, between option A and option B, so having Clay County Sheriff's Office take all of it, or keeping our MOUs in place with Green Cove Police Department? And
I'd like to keep the MOUs with the Orange Park Police Department and the Green Cove Springs Police Department.
Okay.
Frankly, well, I might as well just say it, I think you all know, I'd like to keep our school police department as well. I think that, well, you've heard my voice. Thanks.
Ms. Clark, I think she said already she wanted to keep the MOUs.
So as far as I'm concerned, those are the major items that would need to be talked about before we even started. Yeah, there's other items related to accounting and those kinds of things that would be entered into the terms of agreement. Those are like the biggies for like the second. So,
Well, I just through the chair, I was just saying, is there any other parameters that y'all would like? Now would be the time, if you decide to put this on, because the idea would be if y'all decide to put this on the November 2nd agenda, there'll be an up and down vote, however that vote goes, but then we'll leave that meeting with a set of parameters. But are there any other parameters or guidance that y'all would like to provide to the superintendent as he assembles a negotiating team?
I just know numbers are numbers. I mean, if we look at the numbers and have questions, I guess we could ask later, right? I mean,
I'm not sure what.
the budget she just gave us to us.
Right.
We don't need to know all the details right now.
Can I just request that our chair be present? Whoever that may be, if that's still you, and then we do that November 2nd too as well.
Be present for,
Negotiations,
okay.
kind of the same
you
way
would
as the
have your
attorney.
board attorney there at the meeting.
Mr. Blocker, legally, is that allowable?
It is allowable. The chair would not speak for the board, would be a representative. Generally, it's the superintendent and the term that there are occasions where you can do that. We just want to make sure the chair is there, really just to kind of, observe and let really the negotiation go through the superintendent, but that's appropriate. Just, again, y'all's authority comes when you come together as a board and speak, so that's
So
acceptable.
I'm one of 5, so the rest of you don't want it. I mean, I think that, I just feel as moving forward, that our chair be present for things, like for these types of, that's just my feeling. It's just one of 5.
Anybody else have an opinion on that? No?
I mean,
I would prefer that our attorney be present.
oh, he will be.
He will be. He will be.
It's just, I guess, the chair is
The
the
attorney
eyes and
only,
ears.
and the other parties that are involved, but not, I don't believe our chair needs to be present.
So I'll just tell the rest of the board, when you have one board member privy to that kind of a discussion, you now have a board member with more information than the rest of the board. So to me, I don't feel like that's the direction I would want to head in. You never know who your chair is going to be. You never know that those relationships can be difficult sometimes. And just for the sake of preserving the trust that we have between us and that everything is equal among us, I have no problem attending it personally. I don't mind doing that if that's what the board would like for me to do.
Do you think maybe I don't know if I would have to do this or not, but like a director from each of us explaining, our priorities and what we think to Mr. Blocker, and then have faith in him to.
Oh, you mean yes,
Yes,
so
we
he's
could
there to
just-
represent us,
Yes.
absolutely, yes. I would be a silent presence in the room, but he, as our attorney, absolutely has the right to speak.
But then can she vote? She make those kind of decisions if she was in the room?
If I were in the room for negotiations, could I then vote on the MOU? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, ma'am. So if, let's just, Madam Chair, if she was present in the room, it really would be for more observation. The actual negotiating would really come from the superintendent. But my role would be to work on the legality and also make sure that y'all's opinions are represented, that y'all are represented as a party, because it's a legal negotiate. You do not have to have a lawyer do the actual negotiating, but you do need to have a lawyer present to make sure that we stay within the boundaries of the law, that y'all's wishes are represented.
Okay, I guess my concern is if negotiations start going in a way that we as a board have discussed openly that we don't want to happen, I guess it would be then your responsibility to say, hey, no, they do not want this. They do not want to go in this direction or whatever. You could then say all of that.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. So my role is to represent the board, because y'all are the elected officials. The superintendent is also operates on behalf of the district in the negotiating process, because ultimately, if it goes in this direction, if y'all decide to put it on the agenda, then approve this, then he will have the statutory, part of the burden will fall on y'all, but also on him to make sure, so he has to have a role, It's an odd, the way it's set up very oddly under statute.
He is
but-
the bargainer. I know, I just went to bargaining 101.
Right.
I know it sounds silly, but,
Right, so
we
his
can
role is
also
to
have
bargain.
executive meetings with the superintendent if we have concerns.
That's
And he can set up
absolutely correct.
executive meetings with what he's thinking with us as well, right?
Absolutely.
And that's how we could communicate.
Absolutely, and Mr. Borowski and I have spoken on this, obviously, not in anticipation of whatever decision you'll make, but understanding how the process would work, he and I have had several conversations to make sure we do this in a way that satisfies you all as the representatives of the people in this regard, and again, we have a lot of work to work through, a lot of details we need to work through, and we have a party on the other side that has their parameters, but I think, Mr. Borowski,
Yeah, I think that the main parts of the contract will need to be discussed today with the length as well as what option. There's things we can obviously put within the interlocal to ensure, the transparency that was spoken of and those kinds of things and how the reporting mechanism comes back to us. And there's other interlocal agreements out there. It's not like this is like starting from square one ever in the history of mankind, right? So there's other models to go after and look at those types of things. Some things that, I become concerned about are really not on the radar of school board members, such as reporting structure for student discipline and how that's worked to ensure that it gets back to the school district side from the other side of the issue. There's things of that nature that I want to make sure in the contracts that they're handled properly by the district. Right? We don't know that an event occurs, let's say, and a resource officer's handled an event, but doesn't tell the district, the school principal or school. There's no way for us to know that they're working on that, right? That's the kind of thing you want in a contract to say, hey, if this happens, this is the way that's going to be handled, et cetera, et cetera. Many instances of that nature.
Well, Madam Chair, if I may, just kind of one, just not to put too fine of a point on it, but since you brought that up, one thing, we have existing contracts with these officers, right? So we would either need to make sure they were assumed by the Sheriff's Department or assigned, and those have different legal meaning and definition based on, how that's going, but those are some of the details. These are kind of a couple layers down further. Not that y'all would not want to understand that, but there things like that has a very defined legal.
And there's
object-
also different fiscal start. July 1 to October 1, at least I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, means that since they're on October 1, you have to front that money. And so I know there's legalities about how to get to the point where we get to October 1 as well, right?
Yes, ma'am. So that's a great point. So I appreciate your point because that is important because we're working on different calendars. So there's just a lot of legalese, if you will, at the level that we're going to have. That Mr. Brodsky and I are going to have, me as your representative and him as well as working with y'all. We're going to have to make sure that we, understand these so we can report back to y'all if there's a question of, hey, we have these officers that have existing contracts. How are they protected? We're not breaching those contracts. How are they transferred over into the Sheriff's Department? How are those handled? So some of that, again, is assumed, assigned, transfer. So some of those legal, we'll get down in the brass tacks on that as far as how that works. So
So is that all you need from us?
I think so. Yes, ma'am. I'm sure there'll be more, but the most important, if there's consensus on placing this on the November 2nd agenda with these parameters.
And I think we all know time is of the essence for getting that negotiated because for a smooth transition, if that does happen, to be ready July 1, they're going to need all the time they can get. So we can't keep kicking the can down the road.
Absolutely, and I think that the only other caveat to that would be, we do need to sit down with the Sheriff's Department's team, so maybe have be thinking about having a built-in time in December to report back and maybe reporting back, we came to an agreement, or maybe we need more time, or we need more guidance. So I just want to allow for that, because I know sometimes negotiations.
I think we could always have either a workshop or a special meeting if we needed a vote outside of our regularly scheduled one. So I think authorizing the beginning of the process, and then if we get to a point where we need to schedule a special meeting, we can do that, or a workshop, either way. If it's just, here's information, or no, we need you guys to vote on this.
So I would just ask in this case, I know that the district, the procedures, the district and Mr. Broski are the how to get things done. I think it would be helpful as you work through that. I don't know if we can take notes so we can see what standard operating procedures you come up with. It might help answer a lot of questions. You know, as you work through, like you said, who does what, telling who, you know.
Sure. It would be all spelled out in the interlocal, like how that would work. And the board would see the interlocal prior to, give us plenty of time for discussion on those parameters once they're developed.
Okay.
Everybody comfortable with that? Okay, so we'll have that item on the November 2nd agenda. All right, moving on, we have the review for our draft agenda for our November 2nd meeting. Mr. Broski.
All right, it's kind of like anticlimactic when that was first. The rest of you have like, okay.
Smooth sailing is what you're saying.
I think so. Okay, the very first item, first of all, when I looked at this agenda, this is one of the lightest agendas that I can recall in the last year or so I'm thinking it's smooth sailing. The minutes are the very first item. Hearing none, personnel consent agenda. And of course, that will be updated closer to the 48-hour time frame. The next one is a proclamation for National Education Week and Education and Support Professionals Day, which is November 13th to 17th, with November 15th being recognized as Education and Support Professional Day. Then you have elementary student out of state travel. That's followed by an amendment to the PACE Center for Girls contract, who, by the way, not a shameless plug, is having a open house today, 4 o'clock, I believe, at their place of ribbon cutting.
Glad you said that.
Yeah,
I'd like to know.
so basically what this does is it releases the district food service obligation and they take care of their own food service, essentially what that says. And the next one is out-of-state travel, K-12. Next is the assessment calendar, normal every year. Next is School Psychologist Week, which is November 6th through 10th. A proclamation for that, recognizing the hard work of our school psychologists. Next is University of Central Florida for internship opportunities, a standard agreement there. Proposed allocation changes, you can actually see that it's an even wash between the staffing specialist and the applied technology handicap position. Next is the monthly financial reports, the budget amendment reports.
Just real quick on C11, promise it will be fast. Are you there? Did you just, I'm looking at, the superintendent contracts, the ones that I know you can sign. Is there a discussion about, is this a want or a need? All I do is remember my mother when I was growing up saying, is it a want or a need?
Yes.
When it comes to, because it's like $250,000, you know?
Which one are you talking about?
Under superintendent contracts between $50,000 and $100,000. Just in general, like when we're adding a supplemental curriculum, I mean, when you're thinking about saving money in the future, I don't know a lot about it because it just has a name, let's say. But in general, when people bring something to you.
Absolutely. So there's really actually 3 things that are happening behind the scenes right now related to that issue. One is taking a look at all federal stimulus money related to ESSER and all of that, because after this year, that money goes away in any recurring costs. So that's all being analyzed line by line. In addition, looking at each position at every school and auditing that in anticipation for that. And I look at the overall budget, and I'm not as Dr. No as Dr. No, but when I look at it and I look where we are for future years, I see the need to really examine the budget, because when you're having federal stimulus money infused, even though we did it in a non-reoccurring way, there's a lot of districts that are challenged right now to release personnel because they pay for personnel through that federal stimulus money. We deliberately didn't do that. But common sense would tell anybody that if that money then disappears, it has an impact somewhere, right? You can't like have that money, then not have that money and say it has no impact. So there's an analysis of that. So that's a long-winded answer to this.
Well, it is, and so like if you're looking through here, some things are just a like, you get, right, Clay Behavior Health, right, I get it. And I think maybe even a little asterisk for me, just so I can learn about these programs, Quaver Ed, a couple of things went through my mind about it was, one, did we have a curriculum prior to that, supplementing material? Two, do we actually need that? Three, when we did our curriculum adoptions, why didn't we consider that then to get it more in one cost? So sometimes when I go through and look, like I had no idea what it was, other than when you look it up on the internet and you don't always get the right answer because that might not be how we are actually using the program. And then things like audiology services, I don't need to, but there are a few things that, like why do we need more Math 180? Is that textbooks? We need more books? Is that?
Or supplemental. So yeah, I'd be happy to answer any question about anything related to it. I would ask the board to also put into context the idea that when you pick one thing out, you're picking one thing totally out of context of a bigger plan or a bigger program.
I'm just looking at numbers.
So I would be glad to answer any questions, meet one-on-one for as long as it takes to satisfy any question that you have related to it. I'm just merely reassuring you that we're doing many, many things behind the scenes right now related to the budget. And I'll quickly kind of point out that not this particular budget year, but future budget years, plans are in place to ensure that the impact is as minimal as possible when it comes to federal stimulus fund versus not having a federal stimulus fund anymore. That's a very real issue in the future, and it's almost everything.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, so I'm not sure which one I'm on. I think I'm on budget amendments reports. Okay, then deletion of certain item report, and then the bid renewal. That's for motor oil, transmission, and other automotive fluids, standard. Then you have Orange Park Junior High window replacement change order. Then you have the purchase, the Board of County Commissioners is purchasing from us. We're not purchasing portable classrooms. The Board of County Commissioners is purchasing from us on that particular item. The next is the interlocal agreement. We've always sold low-priced diesel fuel in the Keystone area for fire rescue vehicles within that, and then they reimburse us because our cost is lower. Next is a resolution for sale of 0.16 acres of Montclair Elementary School. I don't know if you remember at one time, I believe Mr. Addison had a map up on the screen and showed the little sliver at the back. That's what we're referring in this particular item.
So we don't need those goats anymore.
Don't need the goats
To mow the grass.
to eat the grass. And pre-qualification of contractors, substantial completion of Lakeside Junior High School restrooms. Then Orange Park Junior High School restroom renovations. By the way, the restrooms are fabulous. I'm frequenting them every time I've been there. Next, the last item is the public hearing related to parental rights notification and student welfare. Remember, we revised the policy. We had a notice to advertise. We waited the prescribed number of days. Now it's due time for the final hearing related to that. At this time, there's no special actions that could change before the board meeting happens. That's the agenda.
Okay, so next we will move on to reviewing I'm sorry, were there any questions on the agenda before we move on? Ms. Buller, are you good?
I'm good.
Okay, all right, so we'll move on to legislative priorities.
Okay, for legislative priorities, I want to remind the board, last time I passed out a sheet to you, which was the previous year's legislative priorities. I I pointed out that the schedule for the legislative session had moved up. If you recall, we have a lobbyist group called Southern Group that we've retained services of. The county also retained services of the same group. And from that, we've had projects that were paid for through appropriations. We submitted 3 proposals last year, and 2 of them were approved. One was to expand Elevate Academy, which is what we use in order to get students to catch up on credits so they can graduate from high school. The other is a CNA program, to have some funding for a CNA program at Fleming Island High School. So we see that as potentially a natural partnership with Baptist for clinicals, et cetera, right down the street. And Fleming Island High School is one of the only that doesn't have that program. It's a workforce development need. So when you look at it, the reality is that was about almost $700,000. And of course, any time that you're about to get money from the government, there's like 80,000 red tape things that occur. We haven't seen that money yet, but that's the plan for that. So part of legislative priorities is basically a statement as to things that are important to us. We went through this last year. I feel like when I reviewed what we had put last year, I think they're all still valid. The things that are on the piece of paper are still valid in today's world.
So I noticed that the funding part almost identically matches, Ms. Bolo probably saw the same email, the SSBA legislative initiatives. Do we do that on purpose? Is that intentional?
No. FADS, which is the Florida Association of District School Superintendents, as well as every other group, posts their, intended priorities. When you look at it, there are certain ones that would never not be on there. Like increasing the BSA would be something that school districts would always look for. We'd always look for ways to have additional funding so we can compensate our employees and other things. It's a huge organization. I don't see the one thing that that is particularly true is provide the full cost of the increase expected in vouchers and scholarship programs to ensure adequate planning and budgeting. That's still a thing to know that, right? If you don't know how many students are participating in the program, how do you estimate the cost, and then how do you build a budget when their timing doesn't match up with our budgeting, process? And then if more people are involved in that program, then that needs to be cut from some other program. You just don't have that money, you have a finite amount of money. But then if the expense of that program goes up several $1 million, you're taking that money from somewhere else. Where if we knew the total cost to start with, that makes budgeting a lot easier, and you know what your expenses are going into the process. So I don't see anything on there that's, I wanted to ask the board, did you have any other things that you wanted to add or look at? And I really would like to come to some sort of resolution on it, like a final thought process by next workshop. Play day in the legislature is January 16th, 17th, so there you go. We're on that timeline is what I'm trying to achieve. So
Under the workforce development, the last one about the TSA, I don't know how anybody feels about putting unrestricted, so that the legislation doesn't get bright ideas to start restricting it and telling us how to spend the money.
That's a good idea.
Because every county is different when it comes to the TSA needs.
I would also just add for discussion, in years past, it seems like we were most successful when we had a specific ask.
So we're in the process, like we asked for 3 different projects last year, we got 2 out of the 3. We're in the process of developing those projects.
Could we ask for the 3rd? That way it's coming before them a second time?
We could. We have another plan that we don't want to make public yet related to other schools in the district that we think would be beneficial. And then we're still working on the details of how that would work or be implemented. When you ask for funding from the legislature, you kind of have to have it built out prior, like, hey, this is how that would work. So we can certainly come up with individual projects that would benefit the district. I think we're looking for more general, like, platform from the board, like, hey, this is what we're interested in.
That's on there, Ms. Gibbons.
I think what we did with that last
The last one on
Are we
funding.
good with the, maybe adding unrestricted?
Yes.
Oh,
I got that
access
down.
under funding,
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay. Sorry. I missed that.
So, and we could always do this, if you think of something, by all means, call me or email me individually. I'd be glad to adjust the wordsmithing of this and email out a draft final product out to the board, but I'm really trying to provide some sort of ending, to this so that we're on time.
I'm fine with this. I like the correction that you made, Ms. Hanson, to make sure that that teacher salary increase allocation is unrestricted.
Okay.
I'd really like I said, to have some specific asks that are unique to Clay County. I think from the state level, they're very interested in CTE. And I think, a kind of a natural fit there would be what industries are currently struggling to have enough employees. I think obviously education is one of them. I think about nursing, I think about police and firefighting. I think those are all areas that we could potentially expand our CTE reach with funding from the state, because there's a need that we'd be meeting there.
Absolutely. Workforce development is a high priority for the state, and therefore,
Right.
if those align, they're more likely to
Correct.
give you the appropriations.
Right.
So no doubt. So is the board comfortable with this?
I'm fine with it, with the one correction Ms. Hanson made. Does anybody else have input? Or do you need a little time with it?
Run with it, and I'll run it by you if I come up with something.
Okay, awesome.
Ms. Bola, did you have anything to add about legislative priorities?
Just that, I'm fine with it as well, and everyone should have received the FSBA legislative priorities as well. If anybody has any comments, they can shoot them either through us, Ms. Hanson or I, or go directly to the FSBA website as well.
Okay, thank you. All right.
So one of the challenges, if I can end this, right, last year was 123 pieces of legislation related to education. No, I'm just going to bracket here and say maybe select more or less legislation. Can we suggest that? No, I was kidding. Sorry.
Can we
People
not?
wanted their eyes on education for a while, and now that it's there, we can't complain.
123 is a lot.
That there's movement, that there's, whether you want to, there's movement going on in
A lot of those
education.
are common sense items.
That should even be a legislative priority. Yes, you are correct.
All right, so moving on from legislative priorities, we will now discuss the overview of the accreditation process.
Okay. Let's do it. One of the things that happen is there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that board members, aren't privy to. One of the things that's happening right now that we're involved with is accreditation. Like, we're in our own accreditation process. Laura Fogarty's in charge of that, is leading the charge, so to speak, with Agnia. So she's going to give you a quick overview where we are in accreditation, and this way we were fully briefed on it.
I am so sorry to interrupt, but one thing I meant to mention when we were doing the agenda review, we had talked about changing the order of our agenda. Is that something that we can do for the November meeting, or is it too late at this point?
There's nothing that legally would stop you from doing that.
No.
So could we make the changes then that we
Yes.
discussed, moving the discussion agenda up above the consent agenda?
Yeah, thank you for remembering.
Would the board consider postponing that to December? I have to rebuild the template, and then every single item would need to be.
That's fine.
Come on,
That's
boy,
fine.
let's throw a bone to Bonnie. Okay, thank you.
Tell me the order though that you're interested in, so I can get to rebuilding.
We'll do that at the end.
Okay.
Sorry, Ms. Berman.
Thank you.
Thanks for speaking up, Bonnie. All right, awesome.
All right, so accreditation. I just wanted to kind of give you a quick overview of what is happening and where we are. We are accredited through a company called Cognia. They're a global nonprofit entity, and I don't know, I'm used to a clicker.
Yeah, what are you, just.
I can click, there we go.
Just tell me
Page
behind
down.
it.
No, okay, I would not do that. So accreditation now has moved to where it is every 6 years. So we will go through this process again. Our accreditation is up in 2024, but we will have everything done and completed. Everything is due by February 1. So it will be in plenty of time for them to make their decision. But from this point forward, it will be every 6 years. And so every 3 years, we will go through a mid-year accreditation process. So our last accreditation was in 2015. And so whenever we review that and we look at where we were in 2015 and where we are now, I mean, it's really astounding. One of the things that we got pegged on was technology. Well, good gosh, all of our kids are very well versed in technology. So they began using new standards last year. So they did 1 full year of it, and we are the 2nd year of their new standards. So you really can't compare our last accreditation to this accreditation because the standards are so different. They realized that they needed to evolve with the times as well. We started training for this in the 21-22 school year, and we have been attending the Cognia accreditations every year. Every time they have a conference, we go to make sure that we are on board with exactly what they are looking for and that we are an active participant in our own accreditation process. We have been assigned 2 coaches, and I meet with them regularly. So they will overlook, and I'll send things in and be like, hey, this is what we're working on. Are we on the right track? And so they will give us some guidance on that. So when you look at it, we've got several key components. We have to do a self-assessment workbook. The workbook is 180 pages, and it requires evidence analysis of performance data, stakeholder data, and our walkthrough data. So then we gather all of that evidence for all 30 of our indicators, and we work through that workbook because we want to present the best of ourselves. So we have already been collecting that evidence, we've already been doing the analysis, and we've already been starting to generate the summaries of everything. Then Mr. Broski will do a leadership presentation to the Cognia accreditation folks. And then after that, they will do an engagement review, which means that they will review the presentation and they will review our body of work, and then they will decide. So they'll come back and meet with the superintendent, and they will give a presentation of what they have found, of our strengths, our weaknesses, and if we will be accredited or not. So then their recommendation goes to a global committee. That global committee meets 4 times a year. So while we'll be finished with our process February, March, they don't meet until June. So we would not know the final results until that meeting. And if y'all have any questions, just stop me. So Cognia defines their process and our process as a continuous improvement. So that's what they are looking at. They aren't looking for perfection. They're looking at how do we take the data that we have, how do we use it, and how do we improve snapshot view of Clay County. And then our assurances, we had to assure them that we were operating underneath governmental oversight and different things like that, that we do have policies and procedures, that we do have safety and security procedures, that all of our schools in the event of emergency would know how to exit with a fire drill. So we are currently working on gathering evidence for each indicator, and this is where I need you guys. So standard number 8 is about you. The governing authority demonstrates a commitment to learners by collaborating with leaders to uphold the institution's priorities and to drive continuous improvement. So if you have been to a workshop, a conference, a webinar, and you have any documentation of that, if you could email it to me, then I can upload it into our documentation, because they want to know that you are doing continuous improvement as well. So one thing I had the opportunity, I think y'all did a training with a lady named April. And so as I was leaving my workshop, she was coming in to set up. So she did send me a letter on your behalf that y'all had been participating in that. So anything that you can rack your brain about to where you've been, I know you just mentioned you had been to 101 something.
Governing and bargaining.
Governing and bargaining 101. So if they gave you a certificate, send it to me so I can upload it. So if there's anything like
just
that.
get you, maybe, they don't do something like that. I could get you like
An agenda, that'd be perfect.
Okay, I was gonna say.
An agenda or anything, yep.
Yeah,
Any type of documentation that shows that you have been there. Do y'all have any questions?
So, Ms. Fogarty,
Yes.
when we attend school board accredited training, and there's outside resources you can type in there as well, they keep a log of all your professional development, wouldn't that be good?
If you have that, that'd be fantastic.
Like everything you earn points for?
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Yes, ma'am, anything like that. Currently where our schools are in their stages of it, each school is doing their own self-assessment, and they will turn those into us November 1st. So then we can work to make sure that they've got all of their components into it.
When you said that we were behind before in technology, how were we behind?
It talked about in 2015, it talked about a one-to-one correlation with students, and we weren't even remotely close. I mean, we may have had a lab with 20 or 30 computers at the elementary level. But, you know, now, I mean, OCO kind of forced us. We all have Google Classrooms. We all have, you know, different things that we've been able to utilize technology-wise. Yep.
So I would just give a big shout out to Laura. Laura's doing a great job. You know, it's like a massive undertaking. I remember doing this back in the day, and Superintendent Wortham had asked me to be involved, and I thought, well, thank you for volunteering. So I'm sure Laura had similar thoughts, but is doing an awesome job. We're right on track, and so we'll move forward from there.
All righty.
Mr.
But
Brown,
please, reach out with anything.
I know previously, when we did this in 2015, there were board member interviews. Is that part of this as well? No.
It is not. It is a virtual, that will be a presentation, and then they provide what they call coaches, and we have 2 of them. And so anytime, like she will call me on a monthly basis and we'll start talking. And so I'll say, hey, what do you think about this for evidence? And I can see that she's already taking notes, and she gives me feedback on that.
Okay.
So then I can guide my schools, because you remember, they've only been doing this for a year with these new standards.
Right.
They've been doing accreditations for multiple years,
Right.
hundreds of years. But this is just for the new standards. So there's not any interviews at all.
Okay, so all you need from us is documentation of PD.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
And if you have any thoughts, or don't hesitate to reach out.
thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, so I guess that concludes our accreditation process overview, and we'll be moving on to the tobacco policy.
Okay.
Okay.
You again.
Here I am.
Before we start, do you want to introduce our guest?
Oh, yes, all of them are going to introduce themselves. You go ahead. Tobacco-free, or tobacco clay, I always jack it up.
It's okay. So I'm Monique Johnson. I'm the tobacco policy manager with the Tobacco Free Partnership of Clay County, also known as Tobacco Free Clay.
And my name is Drew Duncan. I'm the community engagement specialist with Tobacco Free Clay.
Awesome. So I understand that you met with Monique.
I did. I've had the opportunity to meet with Ms. Johnson. I've had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Blocker. And so anyway, with that, whenever I had spoken with you last, I know Ms. Skipper and Ms. Clark, you were both very interested in there being a policy. So I'll just talk you through how it was created a little bit. Tobacco Free Florida had given us a template to use. So what I did is I used that, well, not just me alone, but me and my team. We met, we utilized the template and the structure of it to then be able to use our Clay County verbiage to then meet all the requirements that were set forth in their tobacco-free model policy. One thing that I had talked with you earlier about, and I still feel very strongly about, I did not use any brands, any products, any specific types, because I feel like the brands are changing, what kids are into is changing. And you know, last time I brought the brick device that was a vape device. kids are very innovative and they use very different things. You know, I have seen where there's a highlighter pen that they are now using. You know, a couple of years ago, they were using what looked like a USB port. So with that ever evolving and changing, I feel like we would have to change our policy quite frequently. So that verbiage is not in there. And I did that intentionally, and I wanted to let you know my reasoning behind it, why it was intentional that way, and that I do not feel like we would be able to keep up with what their latest trends are. Otherwise, you know, in signage, and Ms. Skipper, you had said that Tobacco Free was going to help us out with the signage. So I think that would be fantastic. I would like to work with Ms. Ellis, and let's, you know, should you decide to pass this, and should we move forward, I would like to look at getting signs for all of our schools and what that would look like.
I wanted to talk.
Oh, please talk, please feel free. I mean, it's a discussion, right?
I didn't want to interrupt you if you wanted to.
You're okay.
Okay, so I have a question, Mr. Walker, just from a legal standpoint and a policy standpoint. Some things were taken away, but I want to make sure that we still have left what is pertinent. And my whole goal for this, and I say my whole goal, the community's goal.
You're welcome, I hope you can hear.
But as the reason as to why I brought this to the board was I want to make sure that there is no tobacco use on our campuses encompassing everyone, not just or limited to students. As I explained to Ms. Bergerty, you know, we are supposed to be leading by example, and when you have students coming forward saying that they see teachers in their smoke pit smoking, and they can't have their vape, it's just inappropriate, period. But secondly, you know, we want to make sure that we don't have kids vaping in other kids' spaces. I mean, there's several times where you'll be sitting in a room and you can smell cotton candy, and you're wondering where that's coming from, right? But not only that, I get that this isn't going to stop kids from smoking. However, it puts them and points them in the direction of education if we're lacking that, or opens their eyes. And not always. There's always the exception to the rule where there's a kid who's not going to listen no matter how many times, you know, extreme cases they're locked up in jail. You know, that's just the exception to the rule. But if we can utilize, I want this policy to be able to not only say, hey, it's inappropriate for this to happen, but secondly, being able to provide additional services for them. And I think, with the sensation and whatnot, but I want to just make sure that that's what is encompassed in this. And I know, I do like the fact that we use the word school board activities, because that is sanctioned events, because that encompasses everything. So if you're at a school board meeting, if you're
a field trip,
field trip, a football event, you know, you don't have not only students lighting up or inhaling or whatever they do now, but you also have adults, visitors, and teachers. But I also want to express the concern to the board as to why this is important. They're finding fentanyl in vapes now. So we're not just dealing with nicotine, tobacco, THC. It's becoming bigger. And we have to put steps in place for this to stop. And not only that, I had the luxury, I don't even call it, being facetious, by the way, for those of you that take things literally, of caring for these patients who have been on ventilators and oxygen due to quote-unquote popcorn lungs. So I think that we need this, and we're moving in the right direction with it, but I want to make sure with Mr. Walker that the verbiage still encompasses the model policy, and if we need to add more, and I know if we're going to get signage, should we put the signage back in the policy? And if we are, how long will that take? What will that look like? So those are my questions.
If if I may, through the chair, respond. First of all, I want to thank you, Mrs. Skipper. With your medical background, you have a unique perspective on this. As a board, y'all made it very clear that we want Clay County schools to be tobacco-free. Ms. Fogarty and I had a great conversation, and oftentimes the policy is carried out through the actual code of conduct that runs through the district. But we want to be very clear. We want to make sure that y'all's expectations that Clay County schools be tobacco-free, because these are learned behaviors. This is addictive. There's some troubling trends that are coming out. The original policy was written at a time where they were trying to address it. But this is what boards do. You review it. You look at the current trends. You look at the current situation. You make improve updates with partners in the community that have stepped forward and staff. So I do feel that the policy is written empowers the board. Now, there are a couple of things that were not in there, such as the signage. We don't necessarily have to put that in the policy to make it actionable. I think the board's guidance on that is clear, and the superintendent, I've spoken about this. Signage will be going up, and will be that will be practice and procedure. And as far as the events, I appreciate Ms. Fogarty pointing this out. We want to make sure that, she pointed out to me, you have overnight, not necessarily overnight, but you have out-of-county events. Those would still be governed under this policy. As far as, now there is built-in the provision, because you do have some where, you might have some teachers that are trying to get off tobacco, and there's some, built-ins for that, so that would not apply to those specifics. So it's not such a restrictive, policy that it eliminates those type of options where people are trying. This really is addressing to the kids, to the employees, to making sure that all these events are tobacco-free. People should not be chewing tobacco in here or using vape products, because that sense. So I do feel that this is an improvement on the current policy. Not that the other policy was bad, it's just, it's a different conditions now. Where y'all as a board are doing your role. You're looking at these policies, you're working with staff and superintendent to make these improvements. So I think this is a healthy improvement. I am comfortable with the legalities of this. I think we're not violating anyone's constitutional rights. School districts absolutely can control behavior within it. There's a public policy argument here as well. The public policy is we do not encourage tobacco use on underage. There are restrictions on legal restrictions as well as just general policy restrictions. So I think this strengthens our existing policy, makes it a stronger, but also gives staff the ability to apply it where they need to. Ms. Fogarty pointed out, and I understand she has strong feelings on this, and I agree with her concern, what she has stated, but I'll reiterate. Some policies identify specific brand products. There's some challenges with that, because then it limits, if you're looking at a strict interpretation of those policies and code of conduct. So I do think there's some flexibility, not flexibility in not applying it, but flexibility in applying it correctly. So if there's a different product that comes out, tomorrow that we haven't even contemplated or thought of, we will be prepared. This policy will help empower it. So when the next revision comes through, 5 years or however, whatever our cycle, our policy review cycle will be, we'll be able to kind of carry over into then. So I know that's a long explanation, but I feel like your efforts and the board's efforts to address this are important. Now, if our partners have in the community, if they have any feedback,
Mr. Blocker?
Yes, ma'am.
This is just straight. Teachers smoking in between portables, parents smoking at football games in the parking lot around our kids. We don't address adults at all in this other than vaping. Is that intentional? Employees or adults?
Well, we do have a code of conduct. The school district does have a code of conduct that is it's addressed in other parts. Now, policy, the way the policy is written, this is y'all's policy that we do not want tobacco products used on school facilities, school usage, and so on. There's a different level of if there's an employee of the school district that maybe engages that, and I think that superintendent can address, not the superintendent, I'm sorry. Well, yes, the superintendent, or Ms. Fogarty is representative.
Smoking,
I think it's on here, under policy C, that first paragraph says the school board prohibits the use of tobacco products of any kind or electronic vaping devices by students, employees, parents, visitors, volunteers, or any other person at any time on school board property.
But I wanted to ask about though too, is the next paragraph where it says, no student shall be permitted to use, under the influence, possess, distribute, all that, it just says students. Is there any way that we can incorporate, back up here, employees, parents, visitors, volunteers, as well as?
We absolutely can. The one area of caution, and this is a very nuanced answer, so yes, absolutely. Straight answer, yes. The one potential challenge we have is y'all have authority, the school district of the children and the employees to go there. We do not have, if you have I was going to use the term a consenting adult, that's probably the wrong terminology, an adult of age that is at a football game and steps over to their car and lights up a cigarette, technically that is school district, you know, but I think we'd be limited. What would be the enforcement other than telling them to put it down? So I think we have to keep that in mind, like, who in this process do we have authority over? We have authority over the kids and the employees. So we absolutely can put that language in there, but we're going to be we have to just keep in mind where our authority starts and where it ends in this process. It's just a little bit, school districts are just difficult with some of that when you're dealing with visitors. Now, obviously, there are things that are illegal that you can limit, but tobacco use is legal if you're of a certain age.
Right.
So,
Well, like possessing, okay, they can possess it, okay, if you're of legal age. But I don't think that it should be that they can distribute it, gift it, purchase it, exchange it, or sell it while on district property, no matter who you are.
Oh,
Would that be
absolutely.
still a gray area for?
No, I don't think so at all. I think what so if you have a visitor at a football game, if they're selling anything without a license, I mean, unless, they'd have to have you know what I'm saying, they can't be.
You have to have a vendor agreement.
Right, they'd have to have a vendor, there shouldn't be, we have
No shady stuff
right, no,
Like, let me give
100%.
This 15-year-old, my stash, so he can go make money
Right,
in the school
right.
system and bring it back to me, because we have this.
And this is way too much in the weeds, but you
Right.
have the ATF, I always joke, it's everything that's legal, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, right? They have their own regulation of when, tobacco sale is heavily regulated. So even if you go to the Jiffy store and purchase, it has to be behind, so you cannot be selling cigarettes or tobacco. That's already illegal and triggers that. Beyond, whatever we do today, that's still going to be illegal. But I understand your point. But I just want to be mindful of how we do this, that we make sure that we kind of keep that in mind. We may still be limited. We can put it in there, but the enforcement of that will probably be handled by different agencies or different procedures, if that makes sense.
Right, no, that's fine, I just want to make it clear that, we are completely 100% tobacco free, not only for students, but for everyone. So if we take out, if we add that first paragraph to the second paragraph and take out possessions for, like, a mom who's going to watch their kid play football, she has a pack of cigarettes in her pocket, obviously, as long as she's not smoking it or whatever, then.
Well, she's not an active use of the product.
Right, so that's what I'm saying, like, if we do that, but still include them and encompass them and the, distribute, gift, purchase, exchange, and sell, does that make sense?
If that's the board's wish, we absolutely can do that.
If that's just my 1 of 5, to be very clear, 1 of 5, that's my perspective and what I think on it. I don't know what they.
I'm saying, Mrs. Skipper, if I made it through the chair, I just want to make sure, because I represent Jones Wish. Mr. Brodsky, do you have through Madam Chair, do you have a specific, is the code of conduct as far as to address that specifically?
No, I don't have any problem with the addition of the language.
Right, I don't think it really does, it doesn't create any legal issues. It just helps I think, further drill down. My only concern would be, I don't want a scenario where we're saying that, then we're like, well, why aren't we enforcing it in the parking lot? Our enforcement may be somewhat limited.
I feel like the enforcement, but no.
So could
We
we
should enforce
word,
all of our policies.
could we word it, the school board prohibits the use, distribution, gifting of, purchase, exchange, or selling of any tobacco product of any kind or electronic vaping devices by students. So you see what I'm saying? Just move that
Absolutely.
little bit of language up to the top.
We can, yes, ma'am.
And then you could keep your second paragraph just as it is.
Even, well, it would be repetitive, but keep this, that the students still shall not be prohibited to possess it.
Yeah.
They are underage.
Use,
Right.
be under the influence, or possess.
So I feel like that's my only concern. I don't know if, could we ask our partners what they think or have their input? What your guys' input is on
Sure,
that?
absolutely. So just a little bit of background so everyone understands. This is something that we're tasked with at the bureau level, across the state in all 67 counties in Florida to do, to work with the school districts. So it's not like we're plucking clay out and like, okay, like we need to go ahead and implement a comprehensive tobacco policy just here. This is going on across the board. The model policy that was given out is something that is actually enacted in some of the school districts here. So it's not like a template of a policy. It is a live active policy that is happening at some of the school districts here. Julie and I are invested in Clay. We live in Clay County. We have children here. Ms. Bola taught one of my kids that's actually his freshman year of college. So, you know, we love Clay County, and we think that the policy is good. There are some things that we have, like 15 policy provisions that have been supported, passed down from the Public Health Law Center, that they say that this is what encompasses a comprehensive policy. This is what makes up a comprehensive policy. Like identifying what is an electronic vapor product, like the definition of it. And I agree with Ms. Fogarty when she says that the products, they do change. Well, I will say this, the brand changes, but not necessarily the product in itself. So when tobacco companies, if they submit like the highlighter, there's a vape looks exactly like a highlighter, crazy. But anyway, when they submit this to the FDA, they submit it, it's under an electronic vaping product. So the brand might say, whatever, Vuse. It might say that, but it's still labeled as an electronic vaping product. So that's where like the definition, I think, would still be good to have that and input it in there, because it's still all gonna fall under EVP, all of it. It doesn't matter what it looks like or where you can get it at, it's still gonna fall under an electronic vaping product. And I agree to include like visitors and staff and volunteers as far as like they can't distribute, because it gets a little funky with the nuances of that. Like if I have a pack of cigarettes and somebody's next to me and they're like, hey, can I get one of those, and you pass it out, like is that distributed and stuff? Yeah, to include that there. And let me see, and then the only other thing here that was when it came to the enforcement or addressing any violations. So we know in the Student Code of Conduct, which is top tier, we know that they have procedures for if a student gets caught with doing, vaping, what have you. So is there any kind of like process procedure when it applies to the staff? Anything like that? And that was really, Julie, did you have anything? That was pretty much what I had.
I think that it's a great start, and I think it's a really beautiful policy. I think what Monique just said kind of echoes what you were saying about enforcement. Maybe talking about enforcement of and I don't know if that's in the employee code of conduct or their policy, if they get caught vaping or using a tobacco product. It's not a cessation device. Also applaud you for putting that in, because we want to support people that are trying to quit. If there's any enforcement for our employees that may be caught vaping, or I guess volunteers or not volunteers, like substitute teachers or anybody that might be on school property that maybe is not privy to this, communication of the policy. Other than that, I also don't know if the updated policy includes anything about education provisions. Because like Ms. Skipper was saying, we want to make sure that this is a comprehensive policy that addresses educating our students who may be caught vaping or using a tobacco product or using any drugs. How great is it that we're meeting during Red Ribbon Week? For me as a community engagement specialist, is a very, very busy week for me. But like Ms. Skipper was saying, we're finding other things in these tobacco products or these vaping devices that are not necessarily always just nicotine. Sometimes fentanyl, sometimes marijuana, sometimes other things. So making sure there's some sort of educational component, whether that be referring to the Clay Action Coalition, who is one of our great partners, or the Hanley Foundation, who does a lot of education already in the schools, or providing, a link to free resources, which there are some free resources online for education.
So, and I appreciate you mentioning the Clay Action Coalition, because if our students are caught vaping, there are several things in our code of conduct. The first thing they do, which is through Tobacco Free Florida out of, I want to say West Palm Beach, they do an online program. So that's, first time. And then we do a 6-week program in conjunction with the Clay Action Coalition.
Oh, great. Yeah, and that's how many times? So technically, the enforcement portion of this policy is in student code of conduct.
Correct.
And the teacher conduct?
The handbook?
The handbook?
The handbook.
Employee handbook?
Is it in the employee?
Maybe in the employee handbook
Yeah.
would be the right place to put it,
It might be
Is it there though?
I
Is there
would
any
look at the
discipline if
exact
we find
language.
a teacher smoking or using tobacco?
It might be in there.
You would tell them is there a written policy? I would have to look at the.
We were talking about updating because of this. So should we add it, since it's not in the employee handbook, should we add it to this policy and/or should you update
It would
the?
be more, it would have more strength in the employee handbook, because they actually sign for the employee handbook. That they're acknowledging.
We sign a contract every year.
Since that's a fluid document from what everybody has said,
Yeah.
could we update?
Yeah, we can add that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
not, if we pass this, could we
Yeah.
do it in conjunction too?
There's so many legislative changes. Our student code of conduct is yet again behind, and probably the handbook needs to be updated as well.
We can certainly add a provision in the.
So if we take this enforcement piece and put it in those pieces, those places, and you said that the education is already there, because I know we discussed that last
Are
time.
there links
how
to
it's
it?
already- They
The
do it like the
education?
second time. What is it, the second time they're caught with it, they do the education?
I'm sorry, I was listening to two different
Sorry.
things.
It's that, the education piece is located where?
The education piece is located in our student code of conduct, and we have a contract with Clay Action Coalition where parents and students are required to go to a 6-week course.
Is there a tobacco-free link in your general area on the webpage
I don't know.
for people
I'll check.
seeking education or help?
I will check. I don't know that it is.
Yeah, because we're self-funded too, as our health insurance, we need to do everything possible.
Oh,
Right, yeah.
Well, and there's also a program that Ms. Payne pointed out, like whenever you sign up, you have to say if you are a smoker or a non-smoker.
Yeah.
So they do have.
And there's programs, and they do have a program.
Program.
Yep.
Yep.
It's free. Thank you for reminding me of that.
So I have a question. So can we add also to this enforcement, if the board approves of this? So under enforcement, put students see code of conduct, or whatever legal terms you would put, for disciplinary action, and then same with employees, see code or handbook, teacher handbook. But for visitors, could we still leave that portion, so that we have the ability to enforce our policy upon them?
Yes, ma'am, I think so. I think what we could do is we could put, tailor the enforcement clauses, say, per the code of conduct, for the district rules and other enforcement policies, per local and state law, kind of point to that, because that would help, in some ways, help educate those involved that, hey, if you see someone out at a football game trying to distribute tobacco, call law enforcement, let them know someone's doing it without a license. The ATF might be interested, that people are going to school environments and selling tobacco products, but I think the best way to capture that is to point to, per the code of conduct, per state, federal law, there might be, Clay County may have some local ordinances that address that as well. I know when I was in St. John's, we had some local tobacco ordinances that we put in place to help add a layer of
I think the BCC just passed parks and whatnot as well, so.
Well, that would be important if there's a school district proceeding that's going on at a local park and the county has jurisdiction over that. So I think I can work with Mrs. Margarity on getting, phrasing that, kind of beefing that up a little bit where it kind of points, it's more of an enforcement clause, so to speak. So it points to these other.
Yeah, but just leaving the visitors or something in your legal terms as far as the visitors still being held responsible
Absolutely.
for if you're at any form of function.
Absolutely. Well, because again, people may not, if you're a teacher and you see someone using tobacco, there may not be an awareness that you can contact law enforcement or let people know or whatever the enforcement mechanism is. So hopefully this is something that will help educate, the employees as well of what their responsibilities are when they see that, so.
So are we doing away with the alcohol policy?
No, it would be included in another section of policy.
Okay, so that is, okay.
And what about definitions, legal definitions?
So I'm gonna.
A lot of people do not actually understand what an electronic device is. Either do kids when they first start.
For sure. So if I get through the chair, I do want to drive. First of all, thank y'all so much for what y'all do. I've worked with y'all in other counties, so I appreciate what y'all do. I'm going to disagree a little bit, so bear with me here. But if I'm an attorney for a tobacco company, which I'm not, the first thing I'm going to do is take that definition and we're going to work and figure out a way for the client, Big Tobacco, to be able to work through that. That's what, you got a whole team of lawyers that they take the definition and say, okay, how can we work around that? So when we get caught, there's no like, hey, we're actually outside that definition. So I think in policies like that where you have a very a money-driven industry that is very creative and has a whole team of lawyers on retainer, many more than you'll have, to address this, I think it's better to frame this in a way where it can be applied, where we can make common sense comment, right? So we can take, hey, the policy, the spirit of this is we don't want tobacco use, period. I mean, that could not be clear. That is y'all's, effort. That is clear. So any effort to finagle and say, well, it's not actually this type of, we're actually using this type of device, lawyers can be creative in their argument. So that way it's very clear, it fits within, and as broad as possible definition of tobacco use. So that's where I kind of, with my legal hat, lean a little bit, but I understand where y'all are coming from. But this is, you will have a creative lawyer, and I've seen it before, they will figure out a way to work around that, and they'll say, look, we don't violate your policy. It doesn't fit that definition.
And to add on that, I don't know if you have heard of synthetic nicotine.
Yes,
So that would probably, that's something that it might be an idea to put into this broad definition, because synthetic nicotine and normal nicotine, they might come in products that are the same.
For sure.
Like pouches and all of
For sure.
the different products that they're.
And just for the board's awareness, synthetic nicotine, y'all are more experts on this than I am, but this is an effort in that industry to get around the actual chemical compounds, and because you have a very creative team of attorneys that has said, look, this is a surefire way, because all these policies are very clear in their definition. So, again, tobacco is legal for broad community use, alcohol is legal, firearms, so these are kind of those narrow areas where you have to be very process. Does that answer your question, Mrs. Hanson?
Thank you.
Because I actually saw the synthetic nicotine the other day, and I didn't put two and two together, but they told me, the individual said, I use it for energy. And I'm like, go buy an energy drink. Not that that's any better for you, but I mean, I feel like you're still gonna get the same kind of addictive, and they're the pouches, yeah. So he's like, it's not real, and I'm like, but it is. I mean, I don't.
Synthetic marijuana, is causing people to have seizures. I mean, synthetic things have not been tested by the FDA, and not like any of the tobacco products have been. I could go on all day about the educational stuff.
And also not having the consistency when you buy at a gas station that says it's in it. But anyways, I just think that, this is my opinion as one, that if the board agrees, that we do the enforcement piece like we just discussed, and then the policy piece like we discussed, and then consider adding the synthetic tobacco as well. And then, do we know, is it, like, when can we get those signages? Like, do we need to, what is the process, I guess? Should we just direct you to Ms. Fogarty and Ms. Ellis?
Sure, so there's some signs already out at some schools that the Bureau had funded. So we could take a look at that. It depends on how you all would like the sign to look. Design. There's some like generic ones out there that the state media team already has, but if you want to make it, you know, like specific to Clay County or something like that, add like the logo for the district, something like that, we could do that. And then we would just have to submit that for them to approve it. Turnaround time, probably what, 30, 45 days?
Yeah.
Approval? Okay.
Yeah, it would be approval and then also, you know, obviously manufacturing or creating them for the schools. And we would have to know, we would have to work with you all, you know, once, you know, this passes as how many do you want, the size and the design and everything. And then we'll have to talk to our state offices about quantity of them and get that ordered for you and get them dispersed.
So we'll just let them work with.
And then we have to talk about installation and all that too, because I know on some buildings, the brick building, you know, it's.
And maybe a link, tobacco-free clay?
Yes, yeah. I'll work with our web folks this afternoon.
Okay, so are you wanting to add this to the November agenda?
If that's not too, is that okay with you, just doing those revisions? Is that
I mean, I think so, these are minor, I mean, they're not minor, they're important revisions, but they're not overhauling. So I would say it's appropriate to move forward on November 2nd.
I'm fine with that. Is the rest of the board okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Bola, are you still there? Can I ask a question?
Mrs. Bola?
No? Okay. Yes, Ms. Kickoff.
About the employee
Oh, okay.
revising the
Ms. Gilhousen
employee
was just checking to see if you were still here.
I'm here. It's hard to hear, but I'm here.
about revising the employee handbook after they've already signed it. It seems like that's a change in working conditions and what that seems like.
We'd have to email it out to employees.
Seems like it might, also you might want to consider, I'm not understanding exactly what you mean by enforcement in the area of employees, but we do have some employees that maybe have a habit that they've struggled with over 40 years. And so we have right now, I think 70 instructional openings. I think we need to be careful about what enforcement means. We're already tobacco free, if my understanding is correct, so they may have patches, maybe perhaps they're vaping on their, I've never used tobacco, so I don't know, but I know it's a habit that's hard to break. So I think we need to be careful when we're talking enforcement with our employees and what the consequences of that might be.
May I, if it's okay? I thought about that too, because we are in a landscape now where it is hard to get good educators, keep good educators, and the addiction piece is real. I'm a trained tobacco treatment specialist. I sit on the board with the Council of Tobacco Treatment Training Programs, so I understand the addiction part of it, and I think that's why in the policy it emphasized in the enforcement the cessation access, the cessation aspect of it. So it's like not to give someone like a slap on the wrist, like, oh, don't do that, because sometimes feel like, I can't help it. Like, I wish I could stop, and most smokers do want to stop. Sure. So it's supporting them like, okay, if you want to quit, I can help you. Like, let me guide you. And a lot of people don't even know about the free resources that's out there. People don't know that. My mother-in-law passed away in 2020, and had she known about, free resources that was out there, it could have helped her. She passed away from COPD. She had been smoking since she was 14. And so before I got into this work, I didn't know it was out there. I'm like, wow, like this could help so many people, that free patches, free gum, like cessation, like it's out there and people just don't know. So I think in addition, like once the policy passes, it would be good to kind of get the word out there to let educators know, to let staff and everybody know, like, hey, it is help out there available for you. Like, we're just not saying you can't do this, and it's like, okay, but
Mr. Brodsky, don't we have the wellness, I forget the lady's name, the
Erin
wellness
Payne.
program?
Yes.
I mean, she could kind of take up the employee aspect.
She does, yeah.
She does a lot.
She does a lot,
She does a
yep.
lot. Yeah.
Her Wellness Wednesday newsletter.
Yeah.
And, yep.
And this
She
policy
already
is incredibly
does.
supportive.
Yeah.
Of smokers that are trying to quit. It does include supporting people with approved FDA cessation devices, so that's the lozenges, the gums, the patches, and that could be also there's prescription medication that's also approved. So those would be approved for people to use a patch or chew gum, nicotine gum on campus while they're making their quit attempt, etc. So it's an incredibly supportive policy.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything further? All right, so we will have a policy on the November agenda. All right. So at this time, we'll move on to we've done questions from the audience. Superintendent comments.
No, but remember we're having a caucus right after this.
Okay. Any school board attorney comments?
Yes, ma'am, just very briefly, did just receive a letter of intent from Sheriff Cook, so I'll review that with the superintendent. One thing that I'll be bringing up in the future is some districts are looking at, there's some class action lawsuits involving social media. That's something I'll get with the superintendent and the board to talk about. That might be something we might be interested in. This is identifying where you have some of the big social media conglomerates like Facebook or Meta, some of their practices, cause harm to students and through bullying and things of that nature. So there are a number of lawsuits that are starting in regard. This is similar to some of the other lawsuits that we've seen where the school district, could be identified as a party and get some revenue from that to go to, anti-bullying type. So I'll do more research on that and provide an update. I want to give you a preliminary update. We're starting to see more of that in Florida. So I think in the next couple of months, we're going to want to kind of identify if we feel we're in the best position. Again, this would be revenue that would come back to the district if there's a settlement or a judgment to help pay for like anti-bullying and things like that. It's very structured. So otherwise, that's all I have.
School board member comments. Ms. Bola, did you have anything?
No, I don't, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Hanson?
Yeah, as we move forward with policy, I was wondering, as we start, I realize it's the district staff's responsibility to get all the latest data and fix up the policy, but as we move forward, maybe all school board members wouldn't like this, but I would love an email to give my input while they're developing policy so that I don't have to do it all when we have that first look at a workshop. So is that possible to,
Certainly sending.
I mean, as we start working through, hey, we're working on this policy, do you have any input? Something like that?
Sure.
And I think it would make it easier than all the debate maybe at a workshop and trying to figure out what we're doing before our school board meeting. I don't know if you guys are interested in knowing what's going on with our policy updates as they're happening, but that would be real beneficial for me. And I don't mean for them to type a lot to me, either, just we're working on this policy, that's it. So, I am super proud, and I'll probably talk about both of the next two things also at the school board meeting, but I got with the district office, mainly Mr. Blocker and Mr. Daly and Superintendent Broski, to talk about what I hope is a light to the end of the tunnel when it comes to our progress with the library media policy. It, as I said in the past, has been the bane of my existence, probably, as a new school board member. That is the thing that I have never been really talked to by 32 people at one time about a policy. But what I want to say is, this took a lot of real deep thinking, 20 years of education background, running things through Mr. Daly, Mr. Blocker, talking with Mr. Broski. It actually came to me, if you believe in that, what is something we could do that could put an end to this relentless, subjective topic? I think that together we have come up with something really great, and I cannot wait, and all parents will be happy, and that's what's most important to me. We can't just defend the rights of some parents, we have to defend the rights of all parents, whether we like it or not. And I think this policy will put us in a place where all parents have a say in what type of books their children can read. And so I'm looking forward, Mr. Blocker, getting with you and getting that rolled out. I imagine we're in a little bit of a busy time right now, but I was hoping we could bring that completed policy forward in January. Does that sound good? We're almost in November and we have a half a month December, right?
I think that's doable.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mrs. Hanson, for working hard to help us put that together, absolutely.
I think everybody will be happy. 100% of the people can never be happy.
True.
But if you can get 90%, we're doing really, really well. And then last but not least, I will be starting to hold office hours, and Mr. Blocker will get with me and whomever needs to know about this. My office hours will be on Thursdays, all except for school board night. I will have a 4 to 7 office hours at Orange Park Library once a month, Middleburg Library, and Fleming Island Library. In addition to that, I'm going to hold community forums called Your Voice Matters once a month on a Tuesday. I will have a topic for that community forum. If a school member would like to join, then Mr. Blocker is going to help me work out all the legalities. We won't vote on anything. It's really just a chance for us to talk with the community and talk to each other about topics that matter. So maybe by Thursday I'll have more details on that. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hanson. Ms. Hibbert?
I think we pretty much covered everything. I just want to ask back around, because I know that, I don't know if this goes into your policy or your ideas or what's going on, but I know we talked about the Library Association moving away from that. Do we have a...
Sue, I was asked to look into that, so what I can report back to you is that there's no contractual relationship with the ALA. There's really no like actionable item we could make a statement and tell you why there's no need for any contractual change because there really is no contract.
I think the only formal change that we could make there is they are mentioned in our policy.
That's what I was saying, that they're in our
So you could strike that language from the policy, which it sounds like we're going to be looking at that policy in January. So,
so that's why I was like...
And Mr. Daly I was actually surprised, not at his intelligence, but at the wealth of knowledge he had when it comes to, he's over there, when it comes to the American Library Association. He really had an answer for a lot of questions the other day, and I'm sure he'd be glad to share about that too. So.
And then the last thing I wanted to just talk about is to reiterate, these programs, these computer programs, like we were discussing earlier and I discussed last workshop. Is there anything, do we need to go to staff members to find out what would make their life easier? What computer program is it that maybe we need to purchase to make this data entry better? Because to, be able to enter it in and it be there, we're not crippling a district for 90 days trying to get information, and that it can be relatively available, and the transparency that we discussed, that constituents, taxpayers, they want that.
I'm not sure, I'd like to understand better, just from, I met with the sheriff and her CFO, and obviously I've worked with Dr. Legetko for 10 years. And from what I understand, there are different accounting practices. One's not right and one's not wrong. It's just she's budgeting for one department. When I say she, I mean the CFO for the sheriff's office is budgeting for that one department with a smaller amount of money than what we're budgeting for with half a billion dollars. So I think it's, and it's the workload of also, even if you have a program, you still have to upload that information into the program.
Right,
So,
and you can do it as you go, but what I'm, it's have a starting point, and if you have to go back and upload it, but there's other districts that have a way larger budget than us that have this information, and it's no diss to your department. I don't want you guys to take it personally by any means. I'm trying to help make your life easier by suggesting this. That is there a program that, which I know there is, but that we could do as far as accounting to make it easier.
See, it's super difficult because there are purchase orders, for example, when you're talking about every single school. We wouldn't need to track every teacher spending $50 on a purchase order. I imagine that's not what you're looking for.
Right. No,
we're not looking for that kind of detail. You probably don't even want to track that as a whole from every single school. I think what you're, let me try to see if I'm straight about this. You would like for the big numbers to be more understandable and easier to access on the big umbrella. And maybe,
umbrella's broke down.
Yeah, maybe she can help with that at our weekly meetings too, our monthly workshops as well. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, and then that also helps. Like if I'm just gonna use this as an example, just because I have it, the sheriff, how she broke this down, whether it's the sheriff department, whether it's
CTE department, whether it's whatever, as a person who's one of five, I have to keep saying that, sorry, others know why, but, one of five, for me, and I'm hoping that it's not just for me, because I feel taxpayers feel the exact same way, but for me, when I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, blood work. This is how much we're spending on blood work. Well, we can't cut that because we need blood work. But in my mind, not that I'm going through wanting to make cuts, but seeing where our money is exactly going, so I could be like, hey doc, why in the heck is it, $325 for printers? Like, why? You know what I mean? Obviously that's cheap, but I'm just saying in my mind, when I'm looking at this, I can be like, I don't understand why we are paying that. And as our job, that's exactly what we're supposed to be doing. As
Could it be
annoying
done
as
by
is,
fund?
but-
By fund? Does that make it
Well,
easier?
through the chair, through the superintendent. A lot of the information is actually on our annual financial reports, monthly, that I do provide to you all. I do agree that the monthly financial reports are lacking some descriptions. And we are currently, as a matter of fact, I'm working with my IT team to develop some sort of clearer, more transparent reporting of that information. Now, when you look at the mill money, for instance, or even, yes, let's take the mill money. Typically, if you look at any other district, obviously, they are reporting that from a website perspective as how they're spending that money. Generally, though, those funds are general fund dollars. It is taxpayers' dollars that's coming in to support the school system. It's just another level of the funding source, just like instructional materials. It's a categorical fund, so but I don't actually separate it out unless it's specific from the state that I am supposed to report in that manner. But what I'm getting at is I purposely separated it into a separate fund so that I can identify specifically what we're spending those dollars for. And I do agree, yes, my financial statements, they're not as clear because it's on numbers. Who likes numbers? Nobody. Nobody loves, well, Beth and I. Okay. Well, there's a limited amount of folks out there who wants to do our kind of work. Let's put it that way.
I would say who likes spreadsheets, not who likes numbers.
There you go. There you go. And I know there's a lot of information. It's a foreign language. And until we really can describe it in a general narrative where it's to the level where everyone understands, then, it's a document that's a check mark, basically. So I have been trying, I'm sorry.
No, I thought you were done. Go ahead.
I am trying to work with my IT folks to see if I can expand those reports to where there's specific information related to certain items. What I mean is like your budget amendments. I can't go through every single one of those changes. We moved supplies from this school to this school. Or we moved supplies to equipment in one particular school versus another. But I can generalize on it. And if at that point you need additional information, I am telling you, I can drill down to the specifics. It's just is understanding exactly what you want, because I can interpret it so differently than what you're really telling me. There's two ways everybody can interpret what they want separately. So if I can understand what you want, then I will be happy to supply that to you.
So 8 months ago?
Yes.
8 months ago, I requested that the IT department go to Duval's school website. It was for a reason.
Right.
Because the budget is moved from wherever you guys store it.
Right.
Underneath school board, along with policies. They have a calculator that you can go in and put any school you want to see how much half-cent sales tax they have. 8 months ago, that's the kind of transparency that I think would be beneficial for our constituents. You can go to our school board website, you can click on the 1% mill calculator, you can see everything coming up. We do have some things, but it's not it's disparate, it's like in different places, and you get different types of information, but they have a really, really wonderful example under the school board page for Duval County Schools.
And that is the model that, I went through the chair. And that is the model that I have been trying to work with. Some of the data that you are looking at is actually required by the state. And we do have that. I'm not sure exactly where. It's under the transparency page. And you can see the expenditures by school. And it tells you exactly how much money we've actually spent in the school. So it's just enhancing it. And again, it's really and I actually have, by the way, I used to work for Google, so I do have the background on the reporting that they do have. And like I said, I've been trying to model that, so.
Because nobody cares how many pencils we buy.
No, I mean, but if you need it, I can get it.
Yes.
That's all I have.
Ms. Clark?
I wasn't going to say anything because I know everybody's in a rush, long meeting, but I did tour. I was invited by Matt Schachter to tour Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and as I had left the building, Bryce and Steve Mills were leaving. So we at least said hi.
Yes.
But I did learn a lot, and Laura Fogarty and I will probably meet and just talk things over. But, you know, it's sad that thinking about what they did then 5 years ago, close doors, lock them, close blinds, I assume, and get down by the desk where it wasn't as visible, if you could squeeze everybody in. You know, the perfect way would be to lay down, not stand up. But those locked doors cost a lot of people their life. And probably just as many died from that locked door, and yet that particular killer, murderer, whatever, who will be nameless, he was a coward. He didn't want to enter the rooms. He shot through the glass, could have turned it, walked in, didn't do it. He had another mission. So it was just sad that that prevention cost so many people their life. But anyway, we'll talk and talk about before and after, and the fact that, you know, everybody had a piece of this individual, but we didn't put all puzzle pieces together. And that's what we have to do much better. And I think regarding millage, if we want the voters to continue to support it, they're going to have to see something with change in portables. And I know we just sold 2, that's great. But I think, you know.
We sold it for a really, really, really cheap price.
But, you know, that's what they keep talking about, that's what they want to see. And we spend a lot of money on covered play areas, and of course, I saw a magnificent kitchen down in Keystone, which is worth it because it's obviously a shelter. But we just have to keep portables on the forefront and build buildings that will take that place. Somehow you've got to get that on the front burner. So that's all I have to say.
All right. Nothing from me. This meeting's adjourned.
I'm always grateful you're light-winded at the end.
Do we need to ask Mrs.
Because I'm sure she's going to hit the...
What did you say?